All right, and I believe that no one else in the room had any comments. All right. All right, so moving to public comments from Zoom. I think generally everyone knows the drill, but if you don't, generally if you could either use the raise hand button on Zoom or literally raise your hand, I will call on you. You'll get a prompt on your screen to unmute, and then you'll have 3 minutes to make your public comment. So the first hand I see raised is Carol Marie.
So first of all, about this earned income tax, I would like you to know that this council, I think, is totally tone deaf by wanting to increase taxes right now. People are struggling with the recession, with increase in prices, and it is really not the time to be raising taxes. Cut spending, don't raise taxes. And I'd also like to address some of the things that were in the packet about stormwater management and the parking committee. In the parking committee, you said you're concerned with asphalt and open space. Well, we have a perfect opportunity at 201 to make that entire property open space and a park, and increasing our open space and increasing our green space and reducing our asphalt. And then also you're talking about stormwater management resolution, talks about the effective overdevelopment, stormwater runoff. Make 201 a park on the entire property with no development, and that will certainly reduce the overdevelopment and help with stormwater runoff. I've asked how much the borough wants to make off this property, and you can't really say that. And in one breath, you say it costs more than it brings in. And Fred, last month or so, you said, well, it makes money now because you're not doing maintenance, but that's not sustainable. So really, what would benefit the borough would be to make 201 a 3.7 acre park, because that will be alignment in your chapter 441 stormwater management plan. It'll help with open space. Studies show the quality of life with open space. It reduces crime. It increases values of our properties. So really, I would like this council to, again, really consider the open space. And also, I'd like to mention, when council is speaking and you're in the room, we really can't hear you. I'm in North Carolina right now, so I don't have an option to be in the room. But unless you're speaking in the microphone, you're totally muffled. Fred, I didn't hear a single thing that you said at the beginning of the meeting because you're, I guess, far away from the microphone. So if you could help us out, those of us who can't attend in person, to speak into the microphone, that would be very helpful. But again, and as I started my public comment, an earned income tax, this is not the right time to do it. People are struggling enough, and you're going to be hurting more people. If you say a person with $50,000 income is going to pay $500 more in taxes, that could be taking food off people's table. It's really, really a bad idea and a bad time to be raising taxes on Narberth residents.
All right, thank you, Carol Marie. So I believe this microphone doesn't work very well, right?
That's correct. Yeah, I'm going to see if
what do you think is the best way to address that?
Well, I'm working on getting a longer cord for this device.
Okay.
But I guess what I'll try and do is try to at least get this from being behind here, at least get it kind of closer to you and council.
So I am going to make one response, Carol Marie, which is that your proposal of making 201 Sabine Park from corner to corner, our estimate for the cost of that is $1.2 million for demolitions and about $300,000 of lost income per year for the borough. And we can't do that without a tax increase. Moving on. Other public comment?
Could you clarify? Do you have an estimate of that tax increase, I believe?
Oh, I forgot. It's
13%?
It was about a 13% tax increase.
Significant tax rate.
So just what you're talking about would require a very large tax increase. All right, moving on to other public comment.
All right, the hand I see raised here, the name on Zoom is Christian, I apologize to pronounce this wrong, Naughty.
Yeah, hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great, and you actually got it right. No one ever gets it right, so thank you. The But Christian Panatti, I'm a homeowner in Narberth. I live at 423 Grove. And I was also dialing in today, in particular around the earned income tax proposal. And essentially wanted to say, one, as the first commenter said, I get it that we need more money. I get it that we need to pay for infrastructure. I thought the articulation of past studies and the investments that we have not made in the past was very clear and certainly compelling, and speaks to the need for us to find alternative ways to generate revenue. I would, I guess, echo two things. One is I think the timing is certainly not going to play well, I would suspect, with most residents in the borough. Certainly some of us who, I have a household where my wife's salary, she works in Philly. And so, essentially it's a wash for us. I do not. And so for us, it will be more money out of pocket. What I was concerned with, and I guess what I would ask the council to consider or really pursue, is the presentation of the rationale in comparison to other neighborhoods in the area felt very, what we didn't see was a one-to-one comparison of how are those other communities generating their entire revenue base, and what role does earned income tax play in that entire strategy. What it essentially said is everybody else is doing this, so we should too. But if we're not able to compare what else they are and are not doing to generate their total budget, it's very hard to feel confident that this is actually a strategic decision and not more so just a way to squeeze a bit more revenue out of the residents in order to pay for infrastructure projects. So I think that's what I would really ask for, is an actual assessment of, not back of the envelope assumptions about what percentage of residents are going to be effective, but the actual analysis of what is the reality for residents in Narberth, how many people will be affected, how much more out of pocket will they truly be, and how does this piece of the puzzle and all of the other revenue strategies that the borough has in place compare to those other neighborhoods, not just this one element. Thank you.
All right, let's see who else we have here. All right, the name on Zoom says Steve.
Yeah, hey, good evening. This is Steve DeRico, 402 North Essex Avenue. Thanks for allowing me to speak. So first point is, want to just express that we are firmly opposed to this new tax, which is what I put in my email to council members the other day. Thank you for getting back to me, Cindy and Samantha. I appreciate the responses. My wife and I my wife works in the borough, so this would be a net new tax against her. My second point is that we are not interested in our tax dollars being spent on studies to improve, to quote unquote, improve Station Circle. Station Circle is perfectly fine just the way it is. So if the borough would just stop spending money on consultants and studies and things, literally the projects that go nowhere, then perhaps there would be money to pave the roads. All right. So I think the fact that we can't even find tax dollars that are currently being raised to pave the roads, I think speaks to how mismanaged the budget is right now. Thank you.
All right. I do not see anyone else on Zoom who wishes to make public comment.
All right, so we just had somebody come in the room, to offer an opportunity. Do you wish to make a public comment? No? Okay, great. In that case, public comment is closed. Let's move on to 9A, which is the presentation.
Yes.
All right, we got to make sure people can hear. So let us know if this is not coming through, folks. Michelle, I'll designate you. Let us know if there's a problem with the audio.
Well, the problem with using that microphone is that the actual source of the microphone is like a speaker like over there.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, it doesn't help us, so.
Okay.
If I talk this loud, can you guys hear me okay?
I wonder, can we make an exception to take a mask cross if people are comfortable when they're speaking.
We've,
Okay.
we've avoided that so far. Let's
Okay.
try to make this work.
So, yeah, so somebody wave at me or get my attention somehow if I'm not loud enough. I'm going to try to be really loud, which a lot of people who know me would say I can do really easily. So anyway,
Can we move the chair and,
I guess,
be happy to help you?
well, I don't really, I just, yeah, I just want to move like this. Take something to write on in case I need to. That's a good idea.
It's the white thing.
It's the owl. The owl has the, so I guess if I sit here, is that,
You want to face it.
well, if I face it, then,
You know, okay, well, whatever.
I don't know, that feels
Try it.
weird. Anyway,
Try like this.
yes.
Yeah, there we go, that's better.
This thing is blowing hot air on me, which is really uncomfortable. So I want to move a little.
Okay.
I'm going to move here. How's that sound?
That's good.
Is that good? Okay, all right. I want to start by thanking Bob, Rob, Samantha, and Michelle Carroll for working so hard on all of the parking work that we've been doing since late October 2021. We've been meeting almost twice a month that whole time, and so a lot of thought has gone into what we put together. In early May, I shared with you the preliminary recommendations that the committee had, and we received feedback from council, and we took that back and we considered that, and we now have final recommendations for you to consider. The packet contains a description of those recommendations, along with some background information. It's going to help you understand what issues and concerns had been identified, why we were even looking at the residential parking, and also what we based a lot of our work on, the reports that were out there for us to work from. And it also contains some non-residential parking recommendations. And through the work of this, we keep finding other things. And we're like, well, it doesn't fall under residential, but we have some things we'd like you to consider. So once council comes to an agreement on the program, something that we're all comfortable with, then the committee would work with the solicitor to draft ordinance changes, resolutions, whatever we would need to do to enact the program. And those, of course, would come back to council for approval eventually. If we come to an agreement, council comes to an agreement on this by, say, the September business meeting, we would shoot for trying to get everything buttoned up so that this could be effective January 1st, 2023. But that's, we need to make a decision in the near term then, if we want to do that. So anyway, so these are our recommendations. We're recommending that we maintain the current existing 2-hour regulated streets. So wherever there's a 2-hour regulated street, we'll maintain those. We're not at this time recommending adding any or making any changes that way. But what we are suggesting is that we would group those into what we're calling neighborhoods, using the same areas that Nelson Nygaard identified when they had, they divided the borough up into 3 sections. And they're saying, let's group the borough the same way. And rather than number it the way they did, we said, let's give them names so it's really clear what we're talking about. North, central, south. Central is kind of the Haverford Avenue Business District and surrounding area. North is anything north of that, and south is obviously south of the tracks. So, and the reason we wanted to do that is we want to allow someone with a 2-hour parking permit to park anywhere in their neighborhood. Right now, they're only allowed to park on their block, and that really limits the parking availability for them in a lot of ways. So we'd like to add flexibility for the folks who have permits, and that's a way to do that. We also are suggesting that the 2-hour limit on parking for somebody who doesn't have a permit applies all day, every day. So if you want to park overnight, you need the parking permit. That way, we're increasing the parking availability for people who have permits. So you're giving them more bang for their buck, if you will. We're recommending that the program be rolled out in a staggered way, and that then every year the processing would happen in the same staggered way, so that it's not everybody in at once trying to get their permits renewed. And you can look at that in the packet if you want to know the details, but it's 3-month periods, and so by the beginning of September, everybody would be worked through and would have gotten, new permits under the new program. We're recommending that we institute a process by which a new 2-hour area could be added and also could be taken away. If the folks living on a block with an existing 2-hour permitting decide they don't want it anymore, we want to give them a way to take it away. Nelson Nygaard recommended that a way you could do that would be to have 60% of the residents on the block sign a petition asking for change, and that if they're wanting to add a new 2-hour designation, you have to have 60% utilization greater than 60% parking. And we're suggesting, well, so if you want to reverse it, maybe under 60%. Again, that's something that council could decide to change the parameters a bit, but we think Nelson Nygaard had a good thought for that. And we feel that that's a way to ensure that there's equitable treatment for future requests. There's a very specific process and set of parameters that can be followed. It's not, it's very objective, it's not subjective. Then we talked about fees, and you've seen those before, and I'd like to share, there's a couple of slides. One shows the structure that we're proposing, that just give you a sense of how, how we came up with what we thought was a good structure for the fees. And you'll see that we're recommending a graduated schedule. We wanted to reflect the fact that if you have more than a couple cars, we're giving you have a greater value of the real estate that you're taking up on the street, and so the additional public resources that you're using. We feel that this structure of allowing only up to 4 permits is a reasonable starting point. That would probably take care of most of the need of households with more than a couple cars. But again, as after anything about this program after it's implemented, if we see from actual experience, oh, we need to tweak this. Maybe nobody applies for a 4th permit, so we don't ever offer that. Or maybe we see too many people needing 4 permits and saying, I still have another car I need to park. We could look into that and see about changing it. We also felt it was important to recognize that some people have no driveway. They might have, on their, as some of us know, a Narberth driveway, one that is so tiny you can't put a car in it of today's size at all. Or they have a shared driveway that really doesn't allow them to use it, or they just have no driveway. And that was why we felt it was appropriate to say, well, if you have nowhere you can put your car off street, then you should pay 1/2 of the base rate for your permit. And we're not suggesting that there be any kind of record of who has a driveway and who doesn't. This would just be something you attest to when you apply for a permit. If somehow we learn that you have improperly attested, well, your permit would be revoked, and to get it back, you'd have to pay twice the permit fee. Don't think many people are going to do that, but in case they do, we have a process for that. So the committee had talked quite a bit about what did we think the base rate should be, and we considered what the feedback we heard from council at the May meeting, but we didn't change our mind. We still think the base rate should be set at $50 a year. And part of the reason that we're saying that is the current fee covers less than 5% of the estimated $53,000 to administer, enforce the 2-hour zone. So, you know, we're really not capturing anything really towards the cost of the program with the $5 a year fee that we currently have. So if we decided to set the base rate at $50, then you'd have these dollar figures that people would pay, the annual fee people would be paying. That's where we are. Again, this is for council to consider and decide, you know, where they think things should land, but that's our recommendation. Let me see if there's anything else I want to say. We also instituted or looked at guest passes, because that's something right now that we allow guest passes, but right now there's no fee for them. We took a look at them and said, well, we really don't want to, there's some things we don't want to change. I mean, there's no limit right now on the number of passes per residence, no limit on the number of renewals, and we're like, oh, that's fine. Guest passes aren't required if your electrician is working at your house and they need to park their truck outside for 5 hours. You know, that's already an exemption in the code. But we really felt to ensure that guest passes are being used appropriately, and that we should have fees that are set in a way so that someone isn't trying to use the guest pass program to circumvent the resident parking permit. And so we felt that an appropriate fee level would be $5 for a single daily pass, or $15 for a weekly pass. If you knew you needed to, you had somebody visiting you for a week, $15 for that. And we're suggesting that residents would apply for the pass on behalf of their guests. That way we can really know for sure, yes, this pass is being applied for by a Narberth resident, not anybody. So, just a couple of other things. We considered the current, there's one thing in the current residential parking permitting that we took a look at. It allows commercial building owners or lessees to get a permit in a residential zone under some very specific rules, depending on the frontage of the building and some other things. We took a look at that, and for a number of reasons felt that permitting should not be allowed anymore, so that once this new program is fully rolled out, all those permits would be invalid. And the reason we felt that those should be kind of allowed to sunset is that the permitting process is very complicated. It's really hard to administer and enforce it because of the way the rules are set up. And it creates a hardship for the residents in those mixed-use areas where you've got a lot of competition between residences and commercial businesses for parking. So that's that. And the new program would be administered using the license plate readers that are currently utilized for parking enforcement, and instead of stickers, so we're not going to have stickers. We talked about the idea of, and that would be the same thing for the guest pass program. We talked about the idea of having hang tags, but we decided that really doesn't work because they're so easily transferable from one vehicle to another, and then it's harder to enforce their proper use. So we just don't feel like that's a good option at all. And so, this is what we're proposing. We're proposing also that once this program any changes are put into place, that we monitor it regularly.
Yeah.
That we monitor it regularly to determine if there's any changes that we should be making. Same thing with the fees. Whatever fee we set at this point, we should be monitoring that every year, along with the review that we do of all the fees that the borough charges, to make sure that we are covering the cost of the program. So that's what I have. I don't know whether we want to talk, about this at this point, or, I don't know where I didn't think to ask you that, Fred, before we had sat down to.
All right, so I think, let's see, does anybody have any concerns with moving forward in general with these proposals? Let's talk about the general, moving forward.
So my only concern is number 7, and I kind of want to talk through what this would look like. And I'll use myself as an example. I'm in a 2-hour zone. I don't have a driveway. So I'm going to pay $75 for 2 cars. I'm fine with that. My parents come once a week for lunch. I'm now going to pay $240 a year, right? $5 once a week, so my parents can park on my street so I can have brunch. Additionally, anytime a friend comes over for something, I'm going to have to remember to say, hang on, I'm going to come in, I'm going to pay $5. Like, that's going to add up, aside from the amount of times that you don't remember. When a kid has a visitor over, like, talk about inequitable. That's the only issue I have, and I appreciate that the hang tie can be transferable, but I really think we need to look at anyone in a 2-hour zone, anyone that visits them for more than 2 hours is going to pay $5. That's going to become a hefty, hefty bill outside of the amount of time that people are going to forget to go log onto a computer. Like when someone pops over for a surprise and you have to say, hang on, let me get on and pay for $5 for you to be here, or you're going to get a $15 ticket, feels like a tremendous burden. Tremendous burden. Particularly, again, disproportionately paying for parking for those who already don't have driveways and are in a 2-hour zone.
Yes, and we talked about that a little bit on the committee, and one of the things that we said was, well, you don't have to park in a 2-hour zone. In most areas of the borough, you can find a non-regulated street not that far from you. Now, we realize there are going to be some people who really need to be parked right there, but in a lot of cases that isn't that.
So I'll keep that. I tell my guests, you can't park on my street. Well, my parents, it's not an option. I'm surrounded. So I'm going to say, I'm sorry you're elderly, but it's going to cost me $240 a year for you to continue with lunch. So we put a sign out that says, hey guests, if you want to see us park in the rated parking lot.
I think that's a little extreme.
I mean, the borough already has signage about 2-hour parking, and everything, I guess that you're saying, I mean, with the current parking system already applies to the exception of the fee.
Exception of fee.
Yeah.
Right. So are you getting guest pass every time they park? I'm guessing not.
Yeah, during the day I'm getting guest pass.
Are you?
When my parents come,
Yeah.
I have them saved in my account. There also hasn't been enforcement for 2-hour parking, and how long.
We would like to see that happen. Yeah.
Yeah, I think I would go with, if someone's going to skate the system and just every week put in a free parking pass, then maybe, we don't try to go for perfection, because I think that's an extraordinary disadvantage to folks who want to have people over. They're paying a premium for people to be able to park near their house.
Do you want to try to come up with an alternative?
Yeah. I would do no fee.
No fee for any guest pass?
No fee for any guest pass.
Because then I, as a resident who lives on a 2-hour block, can apply for a weekly guest pass constantly and never have to pay the
Or do
parking.
a tag. You can buy a tag. I'll give you $50. I'll buy a hang tire. When guests come over, hey, throw this on your window. We know that it's transferable, but it's not going to be 100%. That's what I would.
If the fee is high enough for a transferable guest pass, is that, if we're paying a comparable cost to if instead of just having a permanent pass, if your third car is a guest pass. Basically.
Yeah. Exactly. I'm not going to pay $240 a year for my parents to be able to safely park in front of my house and be comfortable with that. Will people play the system? Of course. But I don't think we direct policy to 100% compliance if we're not ever going to get there.
No, but
Yeah.
you can see the problem we're trying to solve.
I totally agree, but I certainly would not put that financial of a burden on households who are in the most congested places and without the driveways, or anyone for that matter.
I guess maybe the flip side of that I would throw out there for council to consider is if you live in a really congested area and you're paying for a 2-hour permit and you just for whatever reason you don't have guests coming over and you can't, and your street is even more congested because people are having guests come over routinely. I just don't know how like those people would feel if guest passes were free.
Well, we have guests coming now. I would
That's true.
advocate for,
That's
you buy a third permit, it's $100 even. I mean, whatever you have that tag out, and it's a hanger.
Yep, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in other words, it wouldn't be attached to a specific car.
right.
But if it was the same price as, say, the third permit
Yeah.
or the fourth permit, if you've already got 3, which is a lot, that's a lot of guts to take up in a 2-hour zone to get 3 permits to park on the street, but I'm sure some people have to. If you've got a car for business use and then you have 2 people with a car for personal use, so that does happen, I'm sure. So,
Let's look into that.
yeah, we'll consider that. I have that in mind. Thank you.
Andrea, I see your hand up.
So being on video, I'm trying to make sure I heard it right. It's only for existing 2-hour zones, correct?
That's correct. We're not talking about adding any new ones at this point, but we're suggesting that there be a process that the residents of a block would go through to request a new 2-hour zone. Some block decided, we need to have some permitting on our block. There's a process they would go through to get that.
And is there an exemption for like a home health care aide? Some of our elderly residents have regular aides that come in, and it may not be the same aide that comes in every day, but they have aides that come in every day or every few days to help them. And again, like an elderly parent, it's something that adds up.
Well, and maybe that's the same thing as what Cindy was just suggesting, that we have a hang tag, but that the cost is such that it's not going to incentivize someone to try to get around the residential parking permit fee. So we set it at a cost that basically is the same, so you're not trying to game the system by using a guest pass if you're actually a resident.
And currently, the 2-hour zones are generally not enforced on Sundays. You're talking about all day, every day, no matter what?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, and so as I said, that would be a way to recognize that the folks who live on those blocks have asked to have more availability of parking. I mean, they've asked to have 2-hour permitting, and you wouldn't ask for that unless you were having trouble parking. And so, and if we're going to be increasing the fees that they're paying, we felt, well, they should be getting a little something more for that in return. And it also takes away, there's a lot of confusion because some of the 2-hour zones apply, 8 to 6, Monday through Friday. Then there's some that I think are 8 to 4, Monday through Saturday. And it's so weird, they're just not consistent. And we would like to see consistency.
You don't think that would be resolved by allowing them to park along the whole street rather than one block? The availability of parking.
The fact that they're going to be able to park anywhere in their neighborhood gives them a place to park their car that's a little bit easier than what they have right now, where they can only park on their block. However, part of the reason people ask to have 2-hour zones is they'd like to park as close to their house as possible. So if we increase the amount of time that if we say the permitting applies to 24/7, then they've got lots more chance of being able to park closer to the house and not having to go to, a street or two over. Even though it's in their neighborhood, it's still, it could be a bit of a walk depending on, if you've got groceries or something, you might not, you'd rather park in front of or close to your house.
And is that time negotiable? Like, could you make the 2 hours from 8 to 5? Is there a reason why?
Well, I think we had heard, my understanding is that the committee had heard from council a desire to regulate overnight parking.
In the sense that we're trying not to have people use the borough as a place to non-residents park their car when they go on vacation. And I actually found a clipping from December 2015 where somebody in the public came and made that comment to a public health and safety committee that they'd gotten 200 signatures on a petition to have something that prohibited overnight parking. That was like fascinating. It was an article in the Mainline Times. But we're responding to that concern. We're also responding to the concern that there are some people who, have cars that they just want to park, and sit for, months and months and months at a time. They don't use it. And so we think, well, if we're, we don't want that. We just want to help get overnight parking, get a little more control of that, and make sure that people are really parking overnight for the right reasons.
Yeah, I guess I'm just trying to operationalize this.
Yeah.
So you have people over for dinner, I entertain a lot. At the door, I'm saying now at 5 o'clock, everyone please give me your license plate. I'm going to log on. I'm going to get you a 2-hour pass because you're going to be here between 7 and 9:30. That really changes the quality of life. I wonder if the problem is so bad that people are outside the borough coming in and parking that we're now saying anyone in a 2-hour zone, anytime you want to have a cocktail party, please stand there with your laptop and get visitor pass.
Well, I guess, and so I'll come back with the question that Samantha said, though. I mean, people have requested 2-hour parking on their block because there were no spaces for them to park. And I guess what I'm wondering is if there are that many spaces on your block for guests to park, then maybe you shouldn't have 2-hour parking on your block anymore. Maybe you're, if you could get, if we agree that 60% of the residents need to agree that they want that to go to be considered to be removed, maybe you should see. I mean, maybe your block doesn't have the problem that it used to have.
Well, I'm thinking, we want to have these 2-hour zones because this is one of the arguments we make, which is we're increasing density. And really what we want to say is to our parking policies, you need to know if you are renting a place in an apartment, you're not getting a parking permit, right? So you're saying, well, I get one spot with my apartment. If I have 3 cars, maybe Narberth isn't the place I want to be.
Or you're going to park on an unregulated street.
Absolutely.
Well, on an unregulated street in the borough, but blocks and blocks away from your apartment.
I appreciate that. That's why that is so critical, but I am thinking about that time. I wonder, are people going to complain about overnight parking or the quality of life issue of now I'm registering every person that comes to my house after 5?
Well, or they're parking on an unregulated street. Because not every street is regulated. That's,
So Bob had a question. He's muted apparently.
Sure. But we can certainly talk about that some more.
If I may, just one more thing?
I'm sorry, Bob had something to say.
Bob has something to say.
I just wanted to underscore something that Barbara's saying that the committee discussed. The priority here is that is to try to create as much parking as possible for the residents who live in those streets, like yours, Cindy, to create as much parking availability as possible. So when someone comes home from work in the evening or comes home late or comes home at any time of the day, there's space available near their home so they can unload groceries or get kids easily into the house. And so, we created these regulations with the knowledge that most anywhere you are in the borough, you're probably only a block or 2 from a non-regulated street. And as the former borough manager, one of our former borough managers used to say, people will walk 3 lengths of 3 football fields to go buy, shop for a pair of shoes in the mall. But then, when it comes to shopping in our downtown of Narberth, they want to park directly in front of their store. And I think the same could be said for guests who come to, say, visit one's home or do business in the borough. It's really, assuming they're not elderly or disabled, we all live near non-regulated parking, and so it just has to be taken into consideration because we want to maintain as much parking for people who actually want to park near their own homes. So I just wanted to underscore that.
All right. Ira had a comment, and I'll come back to you, Andrew.
My only comment was, sorry, my only comment was that.
Mike, I'm having a lot of trouble hearing anything that you were saying. I'm having trouble hearing you. I'm having trouble hearing you. Can you guys use a microphone?
unfortunately, that doesn't work with the Zoom. We just don't have that technology to be able to do that. So maybe you could sit up here. I mean, that's fine with me, and you know, bring a chair and sit over there, just not at the table. Sit on the side.
Over on the side.
Yeah, over there. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say that, I mean, it sounds like there's gonna be more topics to discuss in the task force.
Well, I'm taking some things. I'm making some notes. Yes.
I'm just suggesting that maybe we're just gonna do that. I think we've heard that.
Yeah.
Well, I want to see if anybody else has any concerns from council.
Okay, anybody, so Michelle, that's right, I said I'd go to Andrea, so I'm gonna go to Andrea and then to Michelle.
So I just want folks to keep in mind that a lot of these 2-hour zones arose around commuter parking and use of the train station. And I wonder how, you know, how since COVID and the change in work habits of people, whether a lot of these zones are still necessary. So I wonder if a number of people will choose perhaps to eliminate these zones in light of the new regulations.
Yeah, it's possible, and we're open to that. As I said, we've got a process. We're suggesting a process that could be used for a block to come and say, to petition and say, hey, can you take this away because we don't need it anymore. But I don't think there's any way the borough has data to know whether residents would feel that 2-hour zone is no longer needed. I think we need the residents to make that request of us. Because we don't live there. We don't know what it's like. They do. So.
All right, Michelle?
Oh, you're muted.
I know, I'm trying to get my mute button. Okay, thanks. Hey, so I just wanted to say, first of all, to the committee members, you all have worked so hard on this, and I just want to thank you for this and for the clarity of the way you presented your recommendations. I know in the past I was sort of a fan of trying to keep the base rate low and expanding the areas that we regulate. But I know that you all have looked at this really hard. And so I respect that you've come out on keeping the regulated areas the way they are and increasing the base rate in order to allow the program to pay for itself. It's great for us. We'll continue to park for free. It's hard for me to justify that because I know that our block is actually just as difficult to park on as the one that's adjacent to us. But, you know, as you point out, this has been a resident-driven process from the beginning. And so we will just assume that people will ask for the parking zones that they need. And as the mayor just pointed out, perhaps ask to remove zones. And if that becomes a problem, we'll revisit it in the future. I just wanted to second, though, Cindy's suggestion that I really do, and the mayor also suggests, I really do think it's a good idea to have the ability for folks in regulated zones to purchase one hang tag for a reasonable rate, like a $25 or $50, whatever. I think that flexibility is a nice thing to give. And, if it became a problem in the future, there was like a secondary market, we found out people from Lower Merion were like buying these hang tags or something, we can always phase it out. But I kind of like the idea of starting by giving that flexibility. I think it is a quality of life issue, and it's probably the right thing to do. So then I just had two quick specific comments. I want to make sure that we are thinking, and I may have missed this, or maybe it already exists, of a process to provide a similar kind of hang tag to our business owners. That would just be for, the downtown area, because we do have business owners who, I remember speaking with Gladys, and, they do a lot of catering and they get deliveries and they need to load and unload, and they don't have a parking space associated with their building. So they were getting like parking tickets. And I want to make sure that they have some capacity to sort of put a hang tag, have a 20, 30 minute window, whatever, some reasonable way for them to avoid having to go and say, hey, don't ticket me. So just if we have the capacity to work that into our program, I think that'd be really helpful. And then my only other concern was with number 6, the requirement that residents provide their address and a copy of their vehicle registration that contains the same address as their residence. And if the addresses are different, no permit will be issued. We just need to think through and make sure we have a workaround for the edge case, which has come up in the past, where you have divorced parents and you have children of age to drive, Okay. And you have the car is registered in the name of the parent who lives in Wynwood, but a parent lives in Narberth, and the kid needs to be able to park there. We need to be able to find some way to give them relief. So not just automatically deny the permit. So as long as we've thought through some administrative workaround for that, those are my only comments. Thanks.
Okay. Could I ask you a clarification question on the commercial? Where are you thinking people are parking that they're getting tickets? Are they parking at a parking meter and they're wanting to be able to park there without feeding the meter, or are they parking? I'm not sure. I mean, I guess I'm thinking, where are they parking their tickets?
Well, I mean, I assume that that Gladys is trying to park as close to the door of Nana's as she can, because they don't have another way to say load up a catering vehicle or to unload a delivery. And so
there are parking meters along there. Is it that are they asking to have a pass so they don't have to pay parking meter fees? Which I guess I would say.
Yeah, I would say that I think that it's a reasonable thing to allow our business owners to purchase a pass that they can just put a hang tag in their delivery vehicle and have some limited time to park in front of their businesses. But maybe it's just something that I don't know if the committee's addressed it. If you haven't addressed it, I would just ask you to give it some thought. That's a request that was that I've had made to me. So maybe the mayor can speak to this more as a business owner too. I mean, you may be able to be able to give some better insight than I can.
All right, so I've heard concerns about the guest permitting, so I think, take a look at that in committee. And, Michelle raised a couple other small concerns, but I'm not hearing any other major issues, so.
No, I guess my only other comment would be about timing, because I think residents should be hesitant to say, this is such a pain, we want to give up our 2-hour parking, knowing that we have apartment development coming up. In fact, that perhaps you want to wait and see the impact of the apartment before you get rid of that 2-hour zone.
Yeah.
Perhaps encourage neighbors. I'm kind of using my own block as an example. Like, hey, we may want to hang on until these apartments get established before we're letting go of that 2-hour.
Yes, that's a ways down the line.
That is a ways down the line. Yeah, those two buildings will be a while before those are finished. But I guess I wonder, does anybody, I have friends who live on 2-hour blocks right next to 114 Forest. They have not noticed any change. Nothing has changed. And that building, at least, if what I've heard from somebody who is a realtor, so I would think they know, is almost fully occupied. So.
Right, but they also knew they couldn't get a parking pass. So that's what I'm saying.
Well,
but people who moved in there knew, we're not getting the 2-hour
I know, but the people that are going to move into the 2 new apartment buildings on Hannaford are going to know that too, because they live on metered streets. You can't get a parking pass if you live on a metered street. So they won't get a parking pass.
Right, so let's say Woodside says, forget it. You know what, the septic traffic is not that what it used to be. Let's just get rid of it because I'm not registering a guest every time they come to my house after 5 o'clock. And then apartments go up there. They may really regret that.
Well, but then they could ask to have it back. This is not a problem.
This is very speculative.
Yeah, exactly.
I think most people are positive.
I'm sorry, I'm too into talking parking for that.
Everybody has a lot of questions. I will once again say that I think that the initial parking permits ought to be cheaper, but I think I'm in the minority here. So I'm just going to say it for the record.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody. I appreciate your support in all this. I guess what I would like to know is, at this point, it sounds like there's enough agreement on the framework, and so I think we probably should start thinking about ordinance and resolution drafting. Manager Bryant, does that make sense, and that we're just fine-tuning parts of it?
I mean, there's nothing that says we need to get this in place by January 1st.
No, but
we can take our time.
I know, but it fits nicely, and then it fits nicely into the office's schedule for the year in terms of what they're doing. So we were kind of responding to their thoughts on this.
Yeah, maybe, I mean, I can talk more with, Michelle Carroll at some point. I mean, maybe it's something where we don't, where the neighborhood we had in the first 3 months of the year, maybe it's,
Yep.
maybe it's now the last one or something like that, and then the program
maybe we
doesn't come
just-
out until April.
Or we just shift them all.
Yeah, that's true too. Or we have-
Because we said, we suggested starting with central because that's where a lot of the competition for parking is between residents and commercial uses.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, thank you, everybody.
Thank you so much, and thanks to the members of this committee who've been meeting twice a month for quite a while now to get these in place. I know what a lift that is, so thank you for your work. Okay, presentation 9B, which is a status update on the Narberth Avenue Bridge.
So if I can introduce our guest
Sure,
here
thank you,
tonight.
Samantha.
So my thanks, tonight we have with us Mr. James Markham from Borough, who will be who's here to bring council and the public up to speed. Following the meeting we had a few months back where the assigned engineer Jennifer Regal gave us an update. We're here to hear a little more about where the bridge is at and how it's coming along. So thank you for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me. Where would you like?
If you want to pull up a chair just as relatively close to this zone as you feel comfortable.
If I sit here and borrow that corner of the table, is that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So thank you for having me. My name is James Markham, as Samantha mentioned. I'm a vice president at Pannoni. I've been there for 23 years now. My primary responsibility is managing our transportation design practice in Southeast Pennsylvania and New Jersey. So Jen, who Samantha mentioned, who's been here before, works for me. So in that role, the main thing I do is make sure that the project managers who work for Pannoni have the staff they need to do what they need to do. So with that, for the last few weeks, I've been working closely with Jen to update the schedule for this project. And I don't know if you're prepared to show it.
Sure, absolutely.
And make sure we have the resources to hit the critical path items to meet that schedule. Any questions while she brings up the schedule?
It's just taking a second to bring up the.
How long have you been working on this particular project?
I have been working on this particular project for about a month.
Okay.
I have not been in it since the beginning.
All right, so this is the 8/17 bridge replacement schedule, which we have up on the screen for people here as well as people on Zoom.
And so let's just start right at the bottom of the page where we are anticipating advertising for construction in December. That's what this schedule gears towards. And there's really two critical path items that I want to point out in this schedule that get us to that date. One, would you mind just zooming back out?
Oh yeah, sure. Sorry about that.
Right there, approved bridge design, right above that green line. That is one of the critical path items. That's an approval from PennDOT and Amtrak that we're working towards. Now we have built into the schedule 2 reviews from this point forward. There have been plenty of reviews so far, so we're optimistic about that. It could be 1, but in the schedule we've built in 2. But that's a critical path item towards getting the final approval to advertise the project. So supporting Jen on that task is another vice president at Pannoni, who senior bridge engineer, has been there for 30 years. And he has a weekly call amongst our bridge practice all across the firm just to make sure resources are put where they need to be. So we've met with him. He is making sure we have the resources as needed for all the bridge design components. So that's critical path item number 1. Critical path item number 2 is about 8 lines down from there, the PUC approval. So that is utility clearance, that includes Amtrak. And we have on that a senior engineer who works in the Warrington office primarily, but has recent and deep experience with that particular task and with Amtrak in particular. And he is being supported by another associate vice president in the Philadelphia office. And the whole reason I bring this up is those are the critical path items that are driving the schedule, and want to make sure that Jen has the best resources there are to hit those 2 items hard and meet this schedule. So feel comfortable with the schedule. Like I said, the bridge design could end up being 1 review rather than 2. We're anticipating 2. The utility clearances, that takes 2 to tango. It could go faster than we think. Could go slower than we think, but I think we've made a reasonable estimate of how long we think it's going to take based on having done this before. Nothing would make me happier than to come back in October and say that those 2 items have gone swimmingly and we're going to advertise in November instead of December. But those are the items that are driving the schedule at this point, and that's why we anticipate the December advertisement for getting a contractor on board and building bridge. That's it.
Go ahead. So, I mean, we're just concerned that the schedule is not going to be met.
Understood.
And from what I hear you saying, that you're committed to bringing the resources to bear on this project so that schedule will be met. Just we get nervous because it's going, and all of a sudden it's not going and it misses. So we just need you to be honest with us and tell us, as soon as you see something that's not going right, let us know, and hopefully, bring the resources like you just described to bear to make it, because at this point we really need the bridge to get done.
Understood. And the only thing I can tell you is this has my full attention today, and will till it's advertised and built. So that's what you have.
I can't ask for more than that. I just asked it. What I can ask for more than that is if you run into a problem, tell us.
Understood.
When you run into the problem, tell us so we can work together to do it. Because if we hear about it after all of a sudden the date comes and it's not done, that's when there's a problem for us.
Understood.
I'm going to point out that that Samantha had a conversation with them 2 days ago, right? And there was no indication that dates had slipped from the last conversation. And then when we got this schedule, it's clear that dates had slipped. So, we're not aware of these problems at all. I mean, if we don't learn about it till the day of a public meeting, it's really impossible for us it's very difficult for us to react to it. And it seems like it's being concealed. Basically, we're not hearing about this until the day of the meeting when we're supposed to discuss it with them. It's not reasonable for us. I look at, so Samantha also included the prior schedule that we had. And every single date on that schedule, with the exception of the CEE resubmission and a public meeting, every single other date has moved on. Every single date, including many of these are listed as Pinoni only. I mean, a lot of these require coordination with state agencies. I understand, you're kind of at the whim of their schedule, but a lot of these are listed as Pinoni, like internal work. and all of those have slipped. If you look at the, the completed items, everything there is past the finish date. The prepare roadway plans, which looks like it was done early, the original schedule had that done on, 8/12. So, the schedule was changed to make it look like it was done promptly, in my opinion. That's what I'm seeing when I look at this. So I have a lot of concerns about how this has been happening, how it's been presented to us, as not presented.
Sure. So I said my main responsibility is to bring the resources to projects and make sure they're moving forward. I'd say my second priority on this project is to understand how we got here, and that's what you're talking about. Because I know Pannoni has served the borough for a long time in other capacities, and I don't have any intention of wanting to jeopardize that. So yes, the forensics of how we got here is another part of my responsibility. I'm working on that. I'm not sure at this point.
But I think, based on what Fred said, we want to know how you're going to get us back to the old system. What's your recovery to get us back to where we were? Because that's what we told the public. And now when I look at the date with my glasses on, I see that that last 5/13, that used to be in February, right?
The contractor,
That's the last one.
yeah, it was March 2nd.
So it's just 2 months. So we need those 2 months back.
That would be great.
Because that's what we've told the public.
Understood.
So here's the other question. Now that you're involved, are we going to be charged for your time as a vice president of the firm?
No, I am not charging tonight. I don't anticipate charging this project. I haven't asked what the project number is for our accounting system. Like, it's not part of my plan. And then as far as communicating, I've met Samantha. Samantha has my email. We've been communicating, and that I'll be part of that till the end. So, anyone here is welcome to reach out to me. I know Samantha will reach out to me, but we will stay in constant communication. And to your point about getting those 2 months back, we have the right people on the critical tasks. Like, this is the schedule I think that is going to happen with that in place. So those 2 months back, we're working it. I don't want to say we'll have it in November and then have it in December. We'll have it in December, and like I said, nothing would make me happier to come back in October and say this has gone better than I anticipated on August 18th.
I mean, don't miss the fact that it's a public project and this schedule gets published as part of our meeting. So the public saw the schedule.
Understood.
So, I mean, it's just, you put us in a very difficult position.
I understand.
You can see if anybody else. Go ahead, Paul.
Okay. So James, is it James or Jim? Do you have a preference?
Jim is my preference.
I'm Barbara. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate it. So when I looked at this and saw the big discrepancy in the schedule, my initial thought, but initially we just had the schedule for May, and I'm like, wow, a lot of dates have been missed already. What's going on? And then when we got the new one, I said, well, now the dates aren't missed, but there are several that are really close. And then there was also one that was in the meeting minutes from the August 16th meeting that didn't make it on here, which was a Pannoni to do, which was to provide current construction cost estimates by August 16th. And the memo was dated August 16th, but it doesn't say it was done. So I'm like, well, should that be on here? So I guess what I wonder is, what's the plan to make sure that everything that needs to be done is on the schedule, and that someone is looking at the dates that are coming up soon and saying, are we on a path to finish those things? And you might have this, okay, we're looking at the critical path item, and we've got our sights on that, but number one and number two, but what about the intermediate things that maybe don't even have anything to do with that? Is somebody keeping an eye on those? So I just feel like there's a lot of moving parts in here, and I'm a little concerned that they're not each getting the attention they deserve.
So I'm on it weekly, so I recognize there are other items there that aren't on the critical path, but they still got to get done, right? And it's different people doing them than the people I mentioned. So that's part of my job, to make sure that Jen has those people to get that done. For example, the constructability review, we bring in people who are construction inspectors. The Benoni has a big construction inspection practice because they've seen a lot in construction. They're the right people for the job. Regarding the date on the memo, that's a typo. Jen and I spoke about that this morning already. The minutes went out saying if you have any corrections, get them back to me in 5 days, I think it was. So that was my correction to that. We're not going to provide something in the past.
Yeah. But, I mean, I think the other thing that a piece of context we may not have is this is not the first slip of it.
Yeah, not at all.
Okay? And the last time this slip we had the same conversation, not with you, but with other people from your firm, and said, you gotta tell us what's going on. And so that's why, if you hear like we're upset, that's why, because this is not like, oh, everything is going perfectly, and then all of a sudden we're just a little slip. It's been slipping all along. And that's really gives us a lot of concern about Benoni's ability to complete this project.
Ira, can I ask you a question and then perhaps you can respond to? You know, our clock is running and we pay you all, and we're not moving along. At what point are we being compensated for paying for an inefficient clock that we're not getting to the dead points that we agreed upon? Like, how is that negotiated in this contract? Or how can we resolve the issue that we have repeated deadlines that are not met and it's being revised as our clock is running?
I mean, at the end of the day, we can't change what happened in the past. What we have to do is try to get to try to compress the schedule as much as possible to get it as close back to the original schedule, but that March schedule as possible. The postmortem is useful for him to do so we can improve his company. But for us, we need the project done.
Well, improve our service to you.
Well, and in general. But yeah, that's what I'm saying. But we need this project to come in, like sooner than this. And so that's really what the focus needs to be on.
The only comment I would add to that is that, some of the other tasks in municipal engineering are time and material. This is not. This project has a budget. We're not going to exceed that budget that we have at this point. It's different from other municipal projects. It's not just the clock running. So
it's a fixed fee, and it's in your firm's best interest to do that as efficiently as possible.
Sure.
Because the more time that you end up taking on it, the less profit you're making off of it.
Right.
So, and I guess that's where I'm sort of like, I'm amazed that this has slipped as much as it has.
Yeah. So.
But I tell you that the problem isn't now.
No, I know.
When it goes into construction, if Benoni is also slow at responding, then the contractor will file a delay claim because they're not getting answers quickly. Because they have general conditions and they expect only to get them to the public work at the time.
Yep.
So that's like the next part. We haven't gotten there.
That's a good point, yes.
All right, so Samantha, you're working most directly with this. Do you have, I think you've been saying a lot of what we want to hear, but do you have concerns or anything you want to raise right now about the way it's going?
Sure, I really appreciate you being here tonight, Jim, and answering some of these questions and concerns. And I'm glad we have an opportunity to connect now and can dialogue in the future about the project. It's just what I've heard from Jim, and knowing that I have an opportunity to work with him as well as Jim now. I think I feel better about this than maybe I did 24 hours ago. So.
All right. Yeah, I appreciate you coming to endure our frustration at this process.
No, it's my pleasure.
Yeah. Especially because you've only been on for a month, you have not been responsible for the concerns that we have. Anybody else have any questions on Zoom here? All right. Thank you.
Okay, thank you all for your time.
Take a moment. The next item is the consent agenda item. Someone like to make a motion?
I move that we approve consent agenda items A through G.
A second.
Any discussion? All right, we're now voting to approve consent agenda items A through G. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay, motion is unanimous. Move on to action items. 11A, stormwater regulations.
I move that Borough Council approve advertisement of stormwater regulations ordinance update.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Ira, thank you. Discussion. Samantha.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, I'll try and see everyone up here. So I'm grateful we have a number of professionals here from the Borough with us tonight. Of course, as usual, our Borough solicitors here who drafted this ordinance. We have our Borough engineer, Eric Johnson from Coney with us tonight to talk about his work on it as well. And as well as to talk to the external review that was done by the Pennsylvania Environmental Council on this ordinance as well. So yes, maybe John and then maybe Eric.
Sure, as council is aware, the DEP is requiring, in order to be compliant with the NS4 requirements from municipalities to revise their stormwater ordinances in order again, to be in compliant. They provided a model ordinance where they're recommending or mandating that certain provisions be within that ordinance for all municipalities. Leone was kind enough to have done a review of our current ordinance and create a checklist of items that were missing that needed to be done to meet the requirements of the model ordinance. So we've revised the current stormwater ordinance to include all of those requirements that are simply just necessary in order to meet the DEP requirements. That's the first part of this ordinance. The second part of this ordinance is that council, very Narberth specific, had a desire to reduce the amount of impervious coverage that we were required in order to undergo a review. Before, there was no option of having a simplified review by the borough engineer in order to determine ways to increase stormwater protections or decrease stormwater runoff from a site, unless I believe it is over 1,000 square feet of impervious surface. Currently, what we're proposing is to have it exempt if it's under 500 square feet, but between 500 and 1,000. They would undergo a new option of doing a simplified stormwater review, which is an appendix that would be attached to the ordinance, standard appendix found in other municipalities, consistent with the model ordinance and what DEP would require. So that is a unique change to Narberth Borough under this ordinance. We've also undergone a review from the Pennsylvania Environmental Council, PEC, and have incorporated a number of provisions regarding green infrastructure and low impact development in ordinance that wasn't there before. Two changes I think that are significant is one, a developer or someone doing the project would be required to demonstrate, if it's a land development, to council that that they cannot undergo this low impact development or green infrastructure. That they can't do that option and justify it. If they can, then they would pursue that and be to your council's satisfaction for it. One of the changes that I'm still working with, and we'll get into that a little bit later, is if it's related to a building permit or something that usually doesn't come before council, we're going to defer that to the engineer. I don't think we're going to want every sort of permit to come in, but if it's a land development, again, that would come before you, and it would have to be essentially a waiver, like you would do for any other waivers. But right now, that's not a requirement. They don't have to demonstrate that there are no other alternatives in order to just use a standard non-green infrastructure. That is one of the significant changes. The other significant changes is we added additional language to really make it clear that a hardship would need to be proven to Borough Council in land developments to council satisfaction. And often upon the recommendation of the engineer, but to Borough Council. This relates to some of the issues that you may recall we originally had under the Free Elmwood development and some issues with the prior code that we've corrected. We have received some revised comments back from the Pennsylvania Environmental Council. Very kind of them to look through, to make some suggestions. We received that, and again, a lot of it is my fault for trying to continue to work on this to perfect it up till today and still ongoing. But we received those recently. I've looked through those reviews. I believe we can incorporate all of the comments that's required into this. And it's focused at increasing the need to do green planning submissions, increasing the definitions of green infrastructure. So I've already gone through and sort of highlighted changes to work those in. In addition to PEC, the borough, Pinoni, and that's why we have Eric Johnson here, has been working with his office, is also going through to just make sure some of the technical requirements are correct. I don't think there will be any substantive changes from what's been in the past. However, I don't have the expertise to ensure, based upon the technical aspects of stormwater, that there isn't any conflicts between the prior Narberth ordinance and the model ordinance, which we've merged. So one, I want to make sure that there's no duplication of general terms to specific terms. I think we would like to keep it specific because we've got to regulate that. And two, that they're just not conflicting with one another. So Pinoni is undergoing that review. I would recommend that the borough, if they want to approve to advertise this, that they approve it subject to future additions upon the recommendation of the borough engineer. So we can perhaps make some of those tweaks. Those tweaks would be done prior to actually advertising the ordinance. So we'd meet all the legal requirements for advertising. At that time, I would also be able to circulate to council a revised version highlighting any of those tweaks that weren't in the original. The DEP is requiring, and I put them in quotes because I don't know if there's really an enforcement, but the goal is that they want this to be in by the end of September. So it is important to have this move forward. I think under the circumstances, we can improve the ordinance, make additional changes, meet the advertising requirements, make sure council's all aware of what's going in there. If we have a little bit more freedom to tweak it again prior to advertising. But it should be in a position to be considered by council at the business meeting in September. There would not be any substantive removals from what you've seen unless it was duplicative or otherwise not recommended by the engineer. But my anticipation would be if anything was added, it would be in line with what council is really looking to see within the ordinance. So that's my bird's eye view of it. Eric, I'm not sure if you had anything additional to add.
Yes, I could probably just add a little more insight to that. I think that there's two parts of it. The changing of that impervious coverage that triggers stormwater is actually going to have a pretty profound benefit for the borough. Right now, the way your ordinance was, you were allowing people to put up to 2,000 square feet of impervious coverage on a property without required stormwater management, which really was quite significant compared to other municipalities, which start regulating at 500 feet 500 square feet. So this is going to have a net benefit for the borough in furthering our goals of improving stormwater management, but still having that a situation where we can help like a homeowner who's doing a small improvement on the property, get through this in a much easier manner. So that is going to be a good change. And then, as John was saying, the reason that we're making this update is because of our state requirements to update it. But I can tell you, your ordinance, just by nature of where you are in Pennsylvania, your existing stormwater ordinance and that of the whole area is already more stringent than is required by the state. So really, the changes that are being made pursuant to the state mandate are more or less administrative. It's adding more strength and more language to the green infrastructure. That was an option that was given in the state model, and we've elected to put in the more stringent requirements and require the green infrastructure as opposed to a minimum requirement that kind of gives more leeway to get around that. So as John said, he has gone very far through in the process of updating it, and we are now giving it the final read through and making sure all the technical aspects are in alignment with any of the modifications. But as he was saying, we don't really expect any major changes, just clarification, making sure everything's in line at this point.
And one of the major changes, again, I think the borough would be interested in is addressing riparian buffers. And that is something, again, that the model ordinance requires that we did not have before, and requiring the use of riparian buffers as part of stormwater management. So again, that's not unique to Narberth Borough, but it is something new, and it's going to be something that benefits the borough. The other significant section is a change that would address what would happen if a permit is erroneously issued. Again, this is standard language that's in the DEP checklist that you should have, that we've now.
Council members have questions about what's the ordinance? Talk a little about process. So I don't see any concerns about the ordinance. I would like to say that the change to the requirement for when you trigger a stormwater review was as a result of investigations of what we could do about flooding in the downtown area. But this came out of the big storm where Haverford Avenue was flooded, the borough parking lot was flooded, a lot of the borough was flooded, and incorporating more improvements into construction projects was the solution that we hit upon. I'm glad to see it finally making into this ordinance. And I'm also pleased to see that green infrastructure is now going to be considered the standard for stormwater management, that they'll have to ask for a waiver essentially if they want to do something other than green infrastructure to handle stormwater. So just to talk about process, so the proposal is that we vote to advertise but allow changes to be made at the recommendation of Eric Johnson. So, the final version will be slightly different from the version we have here, quite possibly. It'll be brought up at our September business meeting. This is in order to make that end of September deadline. Does anybody on council have any concerns with that process? Okay. Let's have a vote then. The vote is to advertise the stormwater regulation ordinance update with allowance, or I forget the exact, under the...
Subject to additional changes as recommended by the borough engineer.
Subject to additional changes as recommended by the borough engineer. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. Motion's unanimous. Move on to 11B, what parking areas?
I move that Borough Council approve Ordinance 1049 to update no parking areas.
Is there a second?
A second.
Seconded by Cindy, thank you. Discussion. Samantha.
So really just to make sure council and the public understand what this ordinance is, it's really a housekeeping ordinance. The borough is not proposing any new areas where parking will be banned. It's really just making sure that the existing no parking signage in the borough is in alignment with our actual regulations by changing the regulations to match the signage. The only change that would happen is we actually would be adding a parking area to the borough with this ordinance. There's a limited area here on Haverford Avenue in discussion with the traffic engineer and our public works and a couple folks in the fire department, where we think we could carve out maybe 3 or 4 spots on Haverford without disrupting the ability of fire trucks to navigate through this area here. So this ordinance would actually, at the end of the day, would actually add a few spots to the borough overall and would make it so that, again, we can actually enforce the signage that we have around town already.
See a lot of nods. Any questions? Okay. The vote is to approve ordinance 1049 to update no parking areas. All those in favor? Any opposed? Okay. That's unanimous. 11C, parking meters.
I move that council consider a $6,000 budget adjustment for parking meters.
Is there a second? All right. Okay.
And Ryan, would you like to?
Sure. So far I really haven't had to talk too much tonight, so I guess I'm due to have to say a few things. So it was brought to our attention by the Public Works Department that we have 2 different types of parking meter in the borough. There's an analog type and a digital type, and the analog type just isn't even made anymore. So for the last 2 years, Public Works has been cannibalizing, extra of the analog to repair the existing ones. And we've now reached a point where we've completely exhausted our supply of analog meters. So if any of our analog meters were to need repair at this point, we wouldn't be able to do that. So the original option that the Public Works Department investigated would be to replace the analog meters with the same style of meter of digital ones that we currently have. And that is the quote that's the quote from the email from Mike Kennedy. That would cost us about $11,000 to do. Upon review with the parking committee, they asked Borough staff to look into whether we could standardize our meters with those of Lower Merion Township, which allow people the option for free 10-minute parking. We looked into that option, and the cost for that, unfortunately, is close to around $33,000. So given that cost differential, and I'm kind of interpreting what was discussed by the parking committee, given that cost differential, we felt that for now, the appropriate thing to do would just be to replace the existing analog meters with the existing same style as digital meters. Just for council and for the public record, I noted in my memo, the parking committee did also discuss the idea of what if we just didn't replace the meters and just solely relied on Park Mobile. And in that discussion, a majority of the committee felt that maybe now wasn't the time for that, but maybe, when the digital meters are completely outdated, that might then be the time to just kind of let them go as they go. So that is the information I have for council. I'm happy to answer any questions anyone has about it. But otherwise, I would agree with the recommendation from the parking committee that we get make the $11,000 expense, which would require us adding $6,000 to the budget because we already had budgeted $5,000 for meter repair and replacement.
Any questions from council members? Sure. The vote is to make a $6,000 budget adjustment for parking meters. All those in favor? Any opposed? Michelle, are you opposed? Okay, you can say it.
No, I voted aye.
Okay, great. Thank you. 11D, volunteer application form.
I move that Borough Council approve volunteer application form.
Second.
All right.
I can second.
All right, Barbara seconded, all right. Discussion.
Just a huge thank you to Barbara for really taking a deep dive in this volunteer form. I'll let you speak to it, but really just the consistency, the background, so we're really understanding that everyone knows what's expected when we volunteer. And adding what I think is really some of the most important is understanding of what our expectations are of volunteers and acknowledgement and understanding of the Sunshine Act.
Well, I mean,
thank you.
We had something, you're welcome. I mean, we had something really good to start from too. I don't know, was it Michelle who?
Oh no, it was Missy who actually, yeah.
I was going to say, I had a feeling I was getting confused. Had put it together and she really she got just about everything in here that we would have wanted. And so it was just up to us to kind of tweak it some more. So, yeah.
And if I may, I just want to remind everyone why we're talking about this. About 9 months back, when Borough Council was making appointments for the following year, there was discussion about our appointment process and making it, a more fair and transparent process. And one of the things we all agreed on that we would do is by having an actual standard application form. That way when we compare applicants and candidates for various volunteer positions, people have the same understanding of what the responsibilities are, and people have the same understanding of what council needs to know about them to make an appointment decision.
And not that this is completely related to this form, but the form has inspired what Michelle Patanopoulos and I have talked about is bringing together the volunteers on boards and commissions and saying, hey, this is our new form, but we do, part of that new expectation is your understanding of the Sunshine Act, what is required with recordings. So we'd like to host a little thank you event and make sure that everybody is on the same page.
So sort of leveraging on that, I was able to watch the Parks and Rec meeting, and Samantha gave an excellent tutorial to that new group about just what you described. And so that's actually recorded, so it could be reused for other purposes, but that was great, because I think they asked a lot of great questions, and I think they now really understand what's expected of them.
Yeah, oh, that's great. Maybe we can actually slice a piece of that. I mean, really no reason to reinvent the wheel and put it on as a resource.
Anybody on council have questions about the next one, the question is the criminal record question still on there? I didn't see it.
No, it was deleted.
Okay. That's it. That was my concern. Ready to vote? All right. So the motion is to approve the volunteer application form. All those in favor? Any opposed? Motion passes unanimously. 11E, parking permits at Sabine.
Yes. I move that council consider a parking permit program at 201 Sabine. This is something that Manager Bryant brought to the parking committee, and we recommend that we follow the proposal she put together. So would you like to speak to that?
Absolutely. Actually, first I want to give a shout out to one of our residents who made public comment on the call, Miss Carol Marie Scanlon. I remember she was kind enough when I first started working here at Borough to give me a little tour of Sabine Park and, share some of her experiences as someone who lives in the vicinity of it. And one of the ideas that she brought to my attention was pointing out how people do make regular use of that parking lot for long-term parking. And, I told her that I thought, I agreed with her thoughts about it. And here we are, about a year later, and, this proposal has made its way to Borough Council after a review by the parking committee. And the goal of this proposal is to continue, given the current usage of the parking lot at 201 Sabine, it is to allow for continued long-term parking, but for the borough to recoup expense in terms of, maintenance and that kind of thing, and also reflecting, kind of as we talked about with the on-street parking, reflecting on the fact that the public lots the borough owns are a public resource, and someone who has long-term parking over at 201 Sabine is denying parking to people who would want to go use the park over there, for example. So my proposal would be that we take the about 15 spaces that comprise the back corner of the property, the part where people probably aren't going to park anyway, the part where, you know, if you're going to the park, you're not going to park. If you're working at 201 Sabine, you're not going to park at, and make that available for people to purchase parking permits for. And, you know, thinking about the cost to the borough and the cost to the public, I have a proposal of $100 per month for those long-term permits. You know, so I'm certainly open. This is the first time council really had a chance to weigh in on this, so I really welcome any feedback and questions that council has about it.
All right. So do you have any sense that the people who park there would pay the $100?
I do not, to be honest with you. I do. Oh, sorry about that.
Right. I was just going to say, I walk up in there every once in a while, and some of those vehicles clearly are not being moved at all. They're there for months and months and months at a time. So, and when I was on council the first time, the police looked into what was parked there, and a lot of it was cars that just been dumped there.
But they're not even moving.
Right, so it's entirely possible that that's some of what we're seeing up there, and so, no, they're not gonna pay this fee, but we can get them out, yeah, which is the same.
All right, Mayor Bill?
So how long would people be allowed to park in the spaces that aren't rented out? Would there be a time? I assume there'd be a time limit for those other spaces.
Yeah, per the ordinance that council passed a couple months ago, parking, you would not be allowed to park more than 24 hours continuously in those spaces.
Okay.
However, with one major exception I do want to emphasize to council and the public, in the event of a snow emergency, the parking lot both at 100 Conway and 201 Sabine would be available for people to park in as long as the snow emergency is ongoing.
I think $100 a month to store a car is a great deal for a business.
I guess my only suggestion would be to check with the cooperative gardens folks to see if they want to, you know, what spaces they would prefer.
That's true.
Work on the configuration with them. Yeah, and then they're in the back. Well, maybe they don't, maybe they wouldn't have any. Any other questions? All right, let's vote. The vote is to create a parking permit program for 201 Sabine. All those in favor? Any opposed? No? All right. Unanimous. Let's move on to resolution 2219, the protect abortion rights. Someone like to make a motion?
I can make that. I move that council consider adopting resolution 2022-19 to protect abortion rights.
For a second. All right. Discussion. Is this the offer? Discuss.
So it's common for municipalities, including Norfolk Borough, to weigh in on matters that they feel are important related to legislation. Municipalities, including Norfolk Borough, have done it for issues such as climate change, for war and aggression in Ukraine, and this would be along the lines where a resolution would be appropriate if council so desired to take a position related to its desires and its expressions of public policy on this particular issue. There are a number of municipalities in the area that are doing the same thing. It does prove helpful for our elected officials at a state and federal level to know that these resolutions are out there so they can speak confidently about the support that they have from their constituents on particular issues. So essentially this resolution is expressing Borough Council's commitment to valuing reproductive rights and supporting and protecting access to abortion, recognizing the constitutional rights that were eliminated under the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization case, and expressing its desire to support, preserve, and protect health and the well-being of all its residents as a result of that decision.
The discussion, so just for the public and when this issue became relevant, and we asked Mr. Walker to look into what we could do as a council, and this resolution coming out of that discussion. So, consideration of resolution 2219 to protect abortion rights. All those in favor? Any opposed? I see no one opposed. Unanimous. Thank you. 11G. Proposal from the Minor Center for the police chief search. Let's make a motion.
I believe the motion sheet has Bob making the motion and Barbara seconding it.
All right, Bob, are you
So moved.
okay?
Second.
All right. Discussion. Samantha?
So as was discussed at the July Borough Council meeting, we accepted the resignation of our police chief, John Gallagher. Before council tonight is a proposal from the Minor Center, which was the same organization that assisted council in its borough manager search last year, along with their qualifications to provide services to the borough in terms of a police chief search. So if council were to approve this proposal, we would then be working with the Minor Center to find our next police chief.
The Minor Center is associated with the University of Lafayette, and they have a long history of working with municipalities on both managers and also police chiefs. So this is what they do. And obviously, we're pleased with the results of our prior engagement with the Minor Center.
Well, same here. They strongly encouraged me to apply for the position here, and I'm very grateful for that.
For discussion. All right. All those in favor of bringing on the Minor Center for the police chief search? Any opposed? Yeah, we can't see Bob right now, but you're going to be brought the motion.
Yeah. There we go.
Great.
Oh, I have my hand up.
We just couldn't see you on the screen, Bob. Motion passes unanimously. All right. That's the end of our action items. Monthly reports. Many of them are in the packet. I do note that fire chief, ambulance, permits, and ARB are not in the packet this month.
Permits were in there.
Or they permits were in there. I take it back. I did
Yeah, I think they are maybe a little bit out of order.
Okay. I did appreciate some of the images from the Public Works Department of the fixing a botched repair of a sewer pipe. It's always nice to see what they're up to.
Yeah, what the utility companies do are good.
Yeah, our poor little borough. All right, let's move on to new business. 13A is admin office reception area improvements.
Yeah, so yeah, we don't need motions. So,
yeah, no motion.
so this is an effort based on feedback, from the Finance Administration Committee to try to get closer to an idea. I don't know if we've quite made it all the way there yet. We're trying to get closer to an idea, and if it's not finished, it might be close enough, or at least council can start talking about it, to provide an area in the admin office that feels welcoming to the public, but also provide some basic level of I don't know if security is the right word. That's not really the word I'm looking for, but just allows the borough staff to do their work and serve the public in the most efficient and effective way possible. For anyone who hasn't been by the admin office or watches this recording later, right now what happens is you walk, through this hallway and you come in and you're in a very kind of relatively small area right in front of the doorway, and you have a table right in front of you and you just have some chairs to your right. And I don't think that's necessarily an ideal space for the public. And it's not really an ideal space for staff either, because a lot of people sometimes will just walk through the chairs and walk right up to someone's desk, no matter what they're doing, or if they're the person who can actually help them or not with their concern. And, talking with our workers' comp insurer, who also does a lot of liability, insurance as well, they had a proposal in our annual review, we do something different that would work better for the public and for the staff. And they gave us some examples from other municipalities. And so Yerkes mocked up, Aisha Dave at Yerkes mocked up the design you have before you. And again, we tried to incorporate the comments from Finance Administration. I think we're open to further modifications as needed. The other alternative that Michelle Carroll found a few months back is she reached out to the interior designer who did the current setup of the admin office and found these modular, all-terrain barriers or screens. And if Borough Council wanted to keep a modular option for the office, those would be an alternative to consider. So I welcome, look forward to hearing, whether we're there yet or not, or what council needs from staff to get us where you want us to be.
Can you put it on screen?
Oh yeah, absolutely, sure.
As you blew it up, Samantha, I'll share. I think you really did take our feedback. So this is dramatically different than what we first saw. I appreciate that. I think my only comment would be is the windows are a little bit smaller than what was proposed with Swarthmore or Lower Second. So Limerick Township, if it was possible to have a little more larger window, as in the four demonstrated, if you could above the slide, that would be my.
Sorry, up, not down.
Yeah, I guess I had envisioned glass about the same height as there, but going from door to wall and door to wall. It's a fairly minor modification, I think. But there's no point having low glass.
Well, I will say in my last position, that actually the admin office was set up basically where there was no glass and there was a partition with a swinging gate door that ran the length of the wall. But you're right, the design that ultimately went in that location to improve it was something that was all glass.
Yeah, but I'm keeping cost in mind. I mean, glass is more expensive than drywall, so I don't know that you need it all the way down to the floor. Because it just adds expense.
If, at your eye level kind of thing, you're seeing more, it just feels less like you're in a box.
Yeah. Less transactionary.
Yeah.
And you show those examples actually in I think the original Michelle Carroll.
But again, glass is not inexpensive, so
no.
It's going to be a trade-off.
Yeah.
No, I'd want to make sure that this was not a claustrophobic space. Not sure how easy that would be guaranteed.
Comment on lines with what everybody else is saying, that just maybe one of our local architect friends, like maybe someone on the planning commission, could probably in about 5 minutes detail that point of departure with that's a schematic of an idea that probably works pretty well, but I think everybody's just sort of pointing towards the details, and I think an architect in about 5 minutes can probably make it look pretty good.
I mean, you can also buy like modular walls, prefab walls that go up and have it all put in already.
No, that's really a thought.
Michelle, you're still muted, but if you want to.
Yeah, no, I didn't hear you calling me. I didn't want to speak out of turn. Hey, thanks. Yeah, so thanks. I'll just say my general thought, and for what it's worth, before I don't know how long we're going back, 10 years ago, maybe, I don't know, 8 years ago. It used to be you'd go in the door and there was a counter, a full L-shaped counter that the public couldn't get past. Had like, it was like, I don't know, there was a door you could lift, like staff could lift it up to get through, but it was a full barrier between a public waiting area and the office. Maybe a little bit more like what you see for Lower Saucon Township, except their work barrier sort of is at sitting height. And what we used to have was more at standing height. It was about chest high, so you'd come in and there would be forms and information and stuff on this chest high kind of counter barrier, but there wasn't a wall. There wasn't a window. It didn't feel transactional at all. And, I wonder if that's something that anybody would be willing to give consideration to, because I think it doesn't have any kind of claustrophobic feeling, and it does prevent the public from just walking in right to somebody's workspace or up to their desk. They understand there's a barrier and you go up and you're waiting your turn, but you're not like at a transaction window. So just throwing that out there. Feels a little friendlier to me, I suppose.
I think that's a suggestion if council is going, I have no issue with.
Maybe because it sounds like that's what you had before and you changed it up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, Sean removed that, and Sean removed that, and then we had, and then Sean removed it, and there was literally no waiting area at all. There were no tables or chairs. It was just walk into the office and not know where to go.
10 years. No, I thought you said that.
New Britain.
New Britain, that you had something like that.
Oh, yeah. Actually, yeah. And New Britain, yes, I did have something like what I ultimately had something like what Lower Saucon has there.
The one thing I wanted to say too is I think when some of this discussion started, there was still also some concern about how do we maybe have protection in a world with a pandemic. What should we have some kind of, and I don't know, I don't know that we can plan for that really, because we don't know that we're going to continually have that as a problem, but I like the idea of whatever we do, if it is something like the, I don't know that I want the chest high counter again, because I always felt like I was in the bank and I was like looking up at people, if you're short, that's not good. But if you have something like that, if there's been with this idea that, maybe at some point you will need to put up some kind of plexiglass if it turns out that's the thing that needs to be done because of a certain situation that we find ourselves in. So in other words, I guess, just can it be adaptable?
Right.
We now know that we might have to adapt to all kinds of things we never expected, but we'd have to adapt to.
Makes a lot of sense.
I'm not hearing a lot of consensus from council on clear review here, so I think maybe.
Well, why don't I do this? I could, as Bob suggested, right now the people working, they're great people working on it, but they're not people that bring an architect's mindset to it. It's really, it's a lot of me, and I'll admit that I am not the most visual imagery sort of person like an architect would be. So I think maybe we could reach out to a couple of the folks that Bob has suggested, let them know this feedback from council about either something that involves more class, something that feels more open, like the Lower Saucon example, and then come back next month, and then maybe their time's a charm, as they say.
That's good.
But yes, it's a public place, but it's also a place where you and your staff work. And so whatever we come up with should be something that you folks are comfortable with. So like you just need to, I know you're not shy about saying these things, but if you feel something that we're proposing is too open or doesn't protect you enough, just
I mean, don't bring us something that you don't think, I mean, we have something already, we're not gonna put in something new that doesn't fulfill your, you know, what you need, so don't bring us something that you don't.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. 13B, EIT and local service taxes. Yeah.
So I don't necessarily want to just reread my entire memo to everyone here tonight. I do encourage people on Zoom or in the crowd to go back and check that out. But basically to give the summary of what's going on here, as part of the start of our budget process, which is, we're now starting that season, this is the time when proposals that might affect the 2023 budget come to bear. And also, we're discussing at this point because we do want opportunity for public comment and public feedback as we determine whether this is a good fit for the borough or not, and determine how, if it is, how it works here in Arbor. So the main reason that I brought this to council's attention was not in terms of revenue generation. That's actually the second priority for it. The main priority is creating an equitable tax base in the borough. And to me, in the research that I found, property taxes generally serve as a more regressive form of taxation. I know a lot of people may have heard of the term house poor, for example. You have a lot of people of a certain house who may not have a lot of extra disposable income, or on the flip side, you have people who may have, inherited a property or something like that, or people who have, a large amount of income and still just live in the same house that they've always lived in. The other main challenge with property taxes specific to Pennsylvania is that in terms of reassessment, a property only gets reassessed by the county when something really major happens, a really major addition or demolition occurs. And the challenge that prior borough management has pointed out in budget presentations to council and the public is our actual property tax revenue has grown by a very minimal amount the last 15 years or so. Generally, it's been about 0.2%, so 1/5 of a percentage point each year. And, of course, we're in an extraordinary inflationary period, but obviously over a 15-year period, inflation has been, even not factoring in this year, inflation has been much higher than 0.2% per year. Income, on the other hand, while I could also get on a soapbox about how, wages haven't properly kept up with inflation in America, that's another topic for another day, but I will say they have more accurately tracked inflation than property values have due to the nature of the assessment process. So I think in terms of the borough being able to keep up with inflation and to, have to be more equitable in how it assesses property taxes, and when property taxes are raised, I felt that the earned income tax was a better option than continuing to rely on property taxes. Another thing I'll point out, and speaking of relying on property taxes, the borough is I think one of the public comments talked about how our total tax base compares to other municipalities. And that's something I might be actually interested in looking a little more into. But I will say in Narberth, at least, almost 3/4 of all borough revenue is from property taxes. And that's a lot of eggs to have in one basket. While it admittedly is one of the most stable sources of revenue, that's not always the case. For example, in 2020, in my last municipality, I was terrified about what the impact of COVID would be on municipal finance because, there was talk about people not having to pay their mortgages and tax deadlines being extended and that kind of thing. And while those programs made a lot of sense for what we were facing at that time, when your municipality is very reliant on property taxes, the idea of people not paying their mortgages, which as many people with a mortgage know, your property tax payment is escrowed as part of your mortgage payment, the idea of suddenly losing a substantial chunk of property taxes while you still have to provide services to people was a very terrifying thought. So obviously, hopefully the things that happen in March 2020 are not something we see again, but we can't predict the future, and that's why when you invest your retirement or when anyone invests in the stock market, you're always advised don't over invest in a specific category or business. And I think unfortunately that's what the borough is doing right now with how reliant we are on property taxes. In the state of Pennsylvania, boroughs are only allowed certain types of taxes under Act 511. And one of those, or two of those, I guess we'll talk about tonight, that the borough does not have are earned income taxes and local service taxes. And looking at Montgomery County, and based on my experience working in Bucks County before, and even looking statewide at what municipalities do, Narberth is certainly in the extreme minority in terms of not having an earned income tax. Now, of course, what complicates this discussion is the fact that our two neighbors are the other two municipalities in Montgomery County that don't have an earned income tax as well. And to recap how the tax works again, again, there's more information in the memo, but for discussion tonight, it's an up to 1% tax on earned income, which has a specific definition based primarily on where you live. However, if where you live does not have an earned income tax, then it's based upon where you work. So even though Narberth does not have an earned income tax, we do have residents paying an earned income tax. Anyone who works in a municipality that already has an earned income tax, aka anywhere else in Montgomery County, or also the city of Philadelphia, are already paying a similar tax. So if the borough then had an earned income tax, that money, with the exception of that being paid to the city of Philadelphia because they have a special sort of separate regulation in regards to that, would be coming back to the borough. I also felt that the earned income tax was fairer than a property tax because it would not impact people who do not have earned income. This council's talked a lot about aging in place, about people who are, people who are either retired, elderly, disabled, what have you, being able to continue to own property and live in this community. And by raising property taxes, those are people on fixed incomes who may or may not be able to afford those increases. Whereas with an earned income tax, it doesn't affect, Social Security is not considered earned income, disability is not considered earned income, money from your 401k, so on and so forth, if you're retired, is not considered earned income. So it would give those people an ability as well to continue to be part of our community. Also as well, there's an exemption for people who make less than $12,000 per year. That is part of the state law, that's what the number is set at. So that kind of is what it is. And then in terms of revenue generation, let me back up actually even further. So, what this proposal entails is not only will we have an earned income tax, but the borough would provide a property tax rebate to people who own and live in their property here in the borough. Looking at the revenue that would be generated based on the estimate from Berkheimer, who's the county earned income tax collector, in the first year of $700,000, $200,000 of that is being allocated towards property tax relief for people who own and live in their property, which is estimated about 1,000 properties in the borough, which would be about $200 per year per property owner. So in terms of revenue generation, again, the state law is that the earned income tax is set at 1%. And, looking at the infrastructure needs of the borough, in the memo I detail, there's quite a bit of deferred maintenance, and that's not, the fault of any prior council or management. It's just, the borough's had to, get by with the revenues that it has. And, for our budget presentation, I'll give more documentation to the efforts that I've made and staff have made to, keep borough expenses in line. And I do try to address that in the memo because I did feel that a reasonable response from the public was going to be, well, before you implement this tax, if you need to pay for infrastructure, why don't you cut spending? I also encourage the public, it's been really good already to get this feedback as part of the earned income. I encourage people whenever we're doing the budget any year, whether there's a new tax or a tax increase or not, to please let us know how you want, your money to be spent. It's something I really try not to take for granted. In my last job, I had one property tax increase in 7 budgets, and it was for a capital project and was tied to that. And here in Narberth, not just me, but prior council management, we haven't raised property taxes in Narberth in a few years here now. And honestly, the only reason we didn't have to raise property taxes this year was both because of the cost-saving efforts we've made, as well as the construction of the 114 Forest property, because that resulted in a new assessment on that property. And while we do have some development going on in the borough, again, the borough is not going to see revenue from that until those properties are actually constructed and open and are fully operational. And the only revenue that we're going to see from that under our current tax system is the property tax bill. And so, again, I think that while that revenue is going to be important to the borough, we're not going to see it for a while, and it's not going to provide the money we need for the infrastructure improvements we need to do. The last thing I want to emphasize on a personal note for council and the public is I'm a Lower Marion Township resident. I live right over the line over in Ballackenway. And so I'm someone as well who is not currently paying earned income tax, who would start paying it if Borough Council were to implement this proposal. So I just think it's important for people to know that I have some skin in this. Now again, in the interest of full disclosure, I will admit when I first came up with this idea, I did actually send an email to our council president complaining about the fact that I might have to start paying it. But thinking more on that topic, I think it's only fair that if I'm the person who is, who's really proposing and pushing this, that I should also be subject to it and be paying it as well. So that's something I just really wanted to emphasize for council and the public. So I look forward to hearing what council has to say as we start this conversation, and I'm really interested to see what our end result is on this.
Can I just ask you to clarify, because we did get an email someone saying, you all just ran for council and never talked about raising the EIT, why now? And there's a very good reason why now, and I know we've said this in FNA meetings, but I just wonder, hopefully folks will tune in a little bit more to know that why we're introducing this now is because the rules have changed, where if we had done it in the past, the school district would have been able and would have taken that tax. So we would have increased, we would have formed an EIT and then lost that money to go to the school district. And when that changed is when we were really able to seriously look at that. And then the second point is we did get an email, and Samantha and I spoke about this before the meeting. I think that there's an incorrect number in here. And the report, it says in 2021, 295 residents in the borough paid an EIT. We think that must just be the county, because that number just doesn't make sense. So
It's probably not Philly. I think that's people who are actually paying an EIT and not a wage tax. What Philly has is technically a wage tax.
Or not surrounding counties.
Who knows? My guess is that's people paying an EIT and not a wage. The Philly wage tax is another category. It's like 20% of people are paying Philly wage tax.
I do want to check that, because as Samantha said, her company is in Montgomery County. So let's ask, was this included in Bucksville or County? Because this number seems really low.
Yeah, our estimate for what would be the effect of this is coming from Berkheimer, which is the tax administrator for Montgomery County and for several other counties. So they have this information. I mean, they know which Narberth residents are paying taxes to where, because, you know, all of these EIT county providers are sharing information about where the money needs to go. So their estimate of like who's paying it should be good. Their estimate for who is currently working in Narberth and not paying it, I think it should also be good. We can clarify like how close an estimate that is. We can ask them to see how good. There was a question about that. We can see, you know, how sure they are of that data. It's a good question to ask, but they are the ones who would administer it. So I'm inclined to think that those numbers are pretty accurate. Ira?
Yeah, so, I mean, I fully support the idea of a more progressive tax, so don't misinterpret anything I'm about to say. But I just have a hard time with this notion that, like, I don't have to pay anything else because I work in Philly. And, like, other people are contributing to this. It just feels like the money we need isn't really coming equally from the people who live here and earn extra money. So I mean, I realize I'm not offering you with an alternate solution. So I get that I don't have a better solution. But I'm just saying, I think that's one of the things we're hearing from the public is like, okay, so this like, this I wouldn't say small, but this subset of the group is paying this extra money and this other subset isn't. I realize I have to pay, you know, 4% Philly tax, but still it just doesn't, it has like a, it seems awkward, okay? And I'm sure you realize that. And on the second comment, which I know is not, I mean, I know it's certainly within our rights to tax, but certain people made decisions about living here and buying here because of the current state of the taxes, and now we're changing it. I mean, we're not changing it, we're talking about potentially changing it. And I'm not saying that, like, we don't have a right to do that, but for those people, it doesn't feel good. Because, like, maybe they made a home purchase decision, and then all of a sudden, you know, the rules change on them. And that's when I hear people talk, those are the sort of the two, I mean, other than, like, why are you raising taxes at all? But, like, I'm not addressing that. I'm just addressing those two sort of, like, things that make people, like, feel bad personally about this.
Barbara?
So I wanted to clarify one thing. I think we're allowed to have a tax up to 1%. So we could do something less than that. And so, you know, maybe that is a way to start this. The other thing I wanted to say is, you know, I totally understand I don't want to have to pay a new tax. But I worked in the city of Philadelphia for 37 years and paid there for close to 5% back in the day, wage tax for all those years, and was really sorry that none of that could go to my local municipality, but that's a deal that the city of Philadelphia has with the state, so, you know, we don't have any control over that, and so if I could, I would pay something extra, and I don't think we have any solution to that, but I think the thing that really stood out for me was, you know, assuming that this is a database that we think is a good database, that there are only 100 municipalities statewide that don't have an EIT. That's 96% who do. So we're very much an outlier. And, you know, when I think about that, I think, well, then that really is telling me that other municipalities have decided, yes, we need to have another source of revenue that, you know, so we're kind of balancing off the two different, you know, basing on different one's property, one's income. And so I totally understand how I would feel if I had to have a new tax on me. And yet at the same time, if I look at what is out there in the world, I'd be like, well, why should Narberth not have this tax when just about, if I lived in anywhere else in Montgomery County except Lower Marion or Upper Marion, I'd be paying an EIT.
Because we're next to Philly.
That's what I think too, but that to me no longer is a good reason now that the school district can't take the tax. So I still think we really should consider it. Maybe we just don't start out at 1%.
Andrea? Yeah.
Hi. So I am a small business downtown, and as are a bunch of small retail businesses downtown. We're not chains. We don't make a lot of money. For those of us who are not incorporated, and what we get at the end of the year is what we make less expenses. We're already paying a business tax on these funds. Now we're being doubly taxed on the same funds. How does that work? And how do we not be doubly taxed on the same funds?
Yeah, I think looking at the definition of earned income, and I don't know if John, if that's something you've had to deal with before or not, whether or not that includes business income, and if so, how that is classified. So I think that's definitely something we could look into and report back to council, because I think one of the last things we want to do is I think it's something I definitely would want to look into and let council know about. Yeah, so thanks for asking that question, man.
I'm not confident to provide an accurate answer on it.
Can I ask you a question?
Well, we're responding to Andrea. So I think the question is, so I guess the answer is Samantha and John are not sure that it would actually apply to business income. I suspect it would, but we're going to confirm whether or not it would apply to business income. So I guess we'll have that answer next month. I suspect that it would. I'll say. I think that you pay your income taxes to the federal government. I think it's based on the income that you're reporting to the federal government. I'm pretty sure you're reporting.
I think it's how the business is set up.
It comes down to whether you take a salary or not.
So if you don't
take a salary, thank you.
Don't take a salary, how is it that you're not double taxed on this money?
We'll get back to you. We'll get back to you next month.
Yeah, I don't think it's good for us to speculate about it without actual information.
It's a good question. Sounds like we're not ready to respond to that right now.
Well, may I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Bob.
Would it be possible to have, say, a model example of taxes, say, modeled for a future year, where, let's say, it's a flat tax increase, like no tax increase, like say it's a flat budget from, say, 22 to 23. What the millage rate would look like adjusted if we were to, say, do 0.5% of EIT. I'm just wondering how that would model out, because I'm assuming that the property tax rate would go down if we were collecting the same gross revenues from a combination of sources, from the EIT and the property tax. And just so we get a feel for what, how the gross revenues would then have an impact on a different distribution of property tax, different collection of property tax.
What we're proposing right now is not to reduce the millage rate, but to add a homestead exemption. So a homestead exemption means that if you own your house and you live in Narberth, you will get a discount to your property taxes. But commercial properties don't see that. It's just people who are homeowners. So it wouldn't reduce the millage. It would provide tax relief to that specific group of people.
I understand. And would that be offset by the EIT revenues?
That's only a part of the revenue from the EIT. The proposal is for about $200,000 of homestead tax relief, and then the EIT would bring in $700,000. So the rest of that would be new income.
So we would be
new revenue for the borough.
So in that example, the borough would be collecting an additional $500,000. So we would have our budget, that would be reflected in our future budget. It would just look very different.
Yeah, that's correct. So the budgetary reasons, I'm going to talk a little about borough projects. We have a lot of big infrastructure projects that are out there. We have agreed already, in principle, to purchase 3 Elmwood, assuming that a grant application goes through. That's $550,000. I mean, that was popular among the community. People were asking us to do this, and we agreed to do it, but it's pricey. You've heard, the constant requests for a park at 201 Save on the entire property, which would also be a very expensive change. That would cost us, millions of dollars in the long run. We have stormwater improvements that we have to make.
We lost the audio. The audio is cutting in and out. I mean, nobody can hear. We still can't hear you.
Welcome back, everyone. Apologize for the technical difficulties. Can you hear me now? Your thumbs up? Somebody? Okay, I see now. All right, I'm saying that we are going to need revenue to accomplish these projects that have been called upon, and the community's been calling for them, the comprehensive plan calls for them. And, I think we on Borough Council think they're a good idea, but they're not cheap. And we're not going to be able to pay for them with just the standard changes, with cost savings or with, the property tax increases that we see year on year. If we want to, increase green space, if we want to, fix our pipes in the long run, if we want to get back on road paving, our options are going to be taking out a lot of debt or raising revenues. Really taking out debt is just kicking the tax raises down the line. So I think this is it's something we need to consider because there are projects that we would like to do and that have been, over the years that have been called for by multiple councils, multiple citizens groups, like the comprehensive plan, and just people in meetings and organized groups like the Save On Coalition. These are expensive projects, and the EIT is an attractive option because it brings in money that Narberth residents are currently paying elsewhere. It brings it back to Narberth, so those residents would not see a tax increase, which makes it a very attractive choice instead of just upping the property tax another, 10 or 15%. That would be a lot of money as well. That would fall very heavily on, most people in the borough. Renters would not feel it, but an awful lot of people would. So I don't think that there are, raising taxes, there are always going to be people affected. And, that would also be unpopular, I would say. Something to keep in mind. Anyway, I've said my statement here, so let me go back to everybody else on council. Actually, Samantha, I'm going to put you back here because you're also proposing a change to the local services tax, which we haven't really discussed. Oh, I'm sorry, Michelle raised her hand. Michelle, go ahead, and then we'll go back to Samantha. I apologize. Yeah.
Okay. Hey, thanks, Fred. Just a quick question. Yeah, no, I'm really grateful for this discussion. I can see both sides of this issue, and I'm just still really going to be thinking about it a lot and looking forward to more analysis of the effects that this would have. But if what I'm hearing is correct, is look, we are going to need to do something to bring in revenue in order to accomplish the projects that we've identified and the things that are residents have asked us to do. And so if that's what I'm hearing from our borough manager, who's quite knowledgeable about municipal finance, and I take that to be accurate, and if I've heard it correctly, the question is, what are the most fair and equitable ways to accomplish that? Not do we need money to do the things that we need to do for our borough, but what is the most fair way to pay for them? What's the best way? So I still don't know. I think we have a lot of details to work out, but that's kind of what I heard. I got one question, Samantha, and the answer is probably going to be no, we can't do this, because if we could, you'd probably have suggested it. But do we have the option to tax use of any forms of infrastructure more directly, such as like a sewer use, like a water rate use, the kinds of things that tax infrastructure more directly, proportional to use?
So I would say actually yes and no. So for example, Borough, the sewer rates that people pay, for example, are based upon water usage. It's a certain rate times the amount of water you used the prior year. So I mean, for example, council could, if you wanted to say just for fixing the sewer lines, almost like any other utility company does, you would have the option of saying, yeah, we're going to raise sewer rates and we're going to use that money to, to fix the sewer lines, because that's the only thing that money can legally be used for. Another option that you would have in terms of that kind of thing would be, a lot of municipalities have started implementing stormwater authorities for the purpose of catching up on maintenance and complying with unfunded mandates from the state in regards to stormwater management. That would be another option the borough could consider. Let's see here. Those are the two that come to mind for me. I guess the third thing I would put on the table in that regard, and I don't think this is exactly what you mean, but what I did in my prior job, the one time I did raise property taxes, Borough Council, in the Borough Code, you're allowed to dedicate property tax millage for specific uses. And so in the case of my last municipality, it was a capital project that this new revenue was being used to pay for. So there was, interest rates were a lot better back then, debt was taken out for that project, and you are allowed to dedicate property tax millage towards debt. So that property tax increase was dedicated towards repaying that debt. But I think that's a little bit different than what you're talking about, because we would still then be raising property taxes on everybody, not just people directly using whatever the services. Whereas if we raise sewer fees, it'd be people who are using the sewer based upon their usage. If we create a stormwater authority, it'd be based on the amount of impervious surface on your property. So maybe those are the things maybe you're more thinking of.
Open space, Act 153.
Oh boy. All right, so there is an option to put an EIT in place that can only be used for green space and open space. I mean, it's there so that people who already have a 1% EIT can dedicate more to green space preservation, and it has to be approved by the public, right? There's a referendum. So,
but it doesn't have to be EIT. You could just have it based on everyone property taxes as well.
Yeah, and keep in mind that a stormwater authority would be like an independent authority that would have taxation power over the borough. It would be creating like an independent group that could that would use its own judgment to tax the borough. So,
now, its members would be appointed by Borough Council, but
it would not be under our direct control.
Michelle, does that answer your question?
Yeah, thanks so much.
All right, any more comments from council on EIT or? All right, can you say a few things about the LST, also in the proposal?
Sure. So a local service tax, which is one of the other taxes allowed under Act 511, is a tax based on where you work. So anyone who works in Narberth Borough, it can be up to $52 per year. Most municipalities that have it, they either go with the $10 or the $52 variety. And the reason for that is once you get above $10, you're then legally required to provide an exemption for people who make less than $12,000 per year. The school district already charges everyone in the borough a $5 local, everyone who works in the borough, a local service tax. So again, just to be fair about this, I am paying local service tax. And if we were to, to move forward with that, I would be paying $47 a year to Narberth and $5 to the school district, along with anyone else who works in the borough, no matter where you live. And again, I think that's just part of, while it's not in the grand scheme of the borough, I know there are a lot of people who, who definitely would like, to keep $47 per year. In the grand scheme of the borough, again, we're talking $25,000, $30,000 a year, which for the borough, it's not a ton of money. But again, I think it's important to diversify our tax base. And so I wanted to present this as another option for council as part of that consideration.
And while we're talking about skin in the game, I do want to point out that multiple council members would pay PLT if it were instituted, and spouses as well. We will all have, many of us would have skin in the game.
Fred, I would happily pay it if you would consider pensions and earned income, but.
Well, not my fault.
I know, so.
But I do, Barbara, think, there's lots of compelling reasons for the EIT, and I know it's not perfect. But one that was the most compelling to me was the fact that our comprehensive plan was so clear, and that we want to help people age in place. And by raising people's property taxes, right, which is why I bring up Savon, to raise everyone's property tax 13% does not meet that comprehensive plan that we did not write on council. We have an obligation to say, this is what you told us. We want to ensure that people can age in place. And the EIT is one way that I see that we can meet that comprehensive plan. Exactly. Absolutely. And then for the percentage of people, which I still really want to go back and check as 295 residents, of folks where they are paying an EIT to a municipality that's benefiting for it, I want that money for us. Exactly.
All right, so it sounds like going forward, we need to look more into that data that was provided to us by Borough County. Follow up on Andrea's question about business owners and what the effects would be. I'm not sure I heard other questions from council that need to be answered, but I'm sure more will come up from residents as we talk about this more. I think I'm hearing enough support on council to continue discussing this. So,
if I can just add one last thing, almost like I said at the beginning again, anyone who, like I said, has a financial interest in the borough, not just on this topic, but I really do. I mean, again, it's your money, it's taxpayer money, and while I ultimately defer to the comprehensive plan about how to recommend council spends it, I think we all welcome direct feedback from the public about specific projects and ideas for the budget every year. So anyone who has any feedback like that, please feel free to contact me or members of council about that.
all right. Let's move on to 13C, which is appointments to the Police Advisory Committee.
Okay, thank you, Fred. We have an opportunity to appoint 5 people to the new committee, and we received 10 applications. So the Public Health and Safety Committee reviewed these letters of interest, and we have a recommendation for 5 folks to appoint. I want to thank everybody who applied. Once again, it's really impressive to see the expertise in the community and the generosity. And there are actually more than 5 people that could be appointed to this. I mean, when you look at the letters, so it was a very hard decision for the committee. So I want to recommend these 5 folks on behalf of the committee for council to consider. John Gonzalez, Ken Kravitsky, Katie Skeen, Rebecca Starr, and Cheryl Bullitt. The resolution asks that we make appointments of 5 years, 3 years, 4 years, 2 years, 1, staggered appointments. So we could specify that. The resolution also asks that one of the members represent the Narberth Business Association. None of the applicants in this pool satisfy that requirement. So that's one question for council. If we could go ahead and appoint 5 members from the pool that applied, knowing that one of those members would have a 1-year term. So I'll stop there, Fred.
Okay, well, let's start with that first question, which is we have no, the resolution, the original ordinance creating the Police Advisory Commission states that the member is going to be from the Narberth Business Association. We had no applicants from the Narberth Business Association. Does anyone have a problem with making 5 appointments, even though we do not have an appointment from the Narberth Business Association? Andrea?
I think the point of view of someone from the business association is really, really important because they have a different perspective, a very different perspective than living in the borough. I wonder if it's possible to expand the commission, to agree to expand it and ask someone, ask Ed Ridgway if he or somebody specifically would agree to serve on this commission. I really think the value, I'm part of the business association, but I'm also the mayor. So it's kind of a weird place for me to do it.
I did reach out to Ed and businesses. It's obviously complex for you to be on it, Andrea, but small businesses just don't have the bandwidth. And we should have probably in the resolution wrote aspirational, the ideal appointees would be someone from the business association. What I think that we can charge the PAC to do is when we ask them to speak to different community stakeholders to make sure that they go to an NDA meeting and host and facilitate conversation. The meetings are going to be open, so while a business owner wasn't able to commit to a yearly meeting or quarterly meeting, I'm sure we can encourage business owners to please attend those public meetings.
But did you reach out specifically to Ed to see if he could do it?
Yes, I did, and Ed's taken on enough in our borough. He does not have the time to do this now. And a couple other business owners, and everybody pretty much did the same thing. They'd love to, but they can't commit to anything more.
All right, well, what do we think about Andrew's proposal that if someone stepped forward, that we would then consider adding another member to the commission? No?
I think we should.
Yes?
Well,
okay.
I think we invite them to come to the meetings, and I would say one of the first charges from PHS would be to actually have the whole committee meet with the NBA.
Fred, would it be out of turn to second the motion that Rob made if I were to second it?
I didn't hear a specific motion from Rob.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought Rob made a motion. I thought he was moving that we appoint those 5 people. So I was saying.
He would need to specify the terms if he were going to make a motion, in my opinion.
Yeah, I can specify the terms.
I
just want to say his.
Unless you really want to move on this now, I see people with their hands raised. But if you want to make a motion, you may do so. But I would prefer to have a discussion at this time.
I'm sorry, Fred.
I just wanted to just.
Hi.
I just didn't hear that last piece.
Between the Zoom format, with the hybrid meeting format, if everyone could maybe just defer to Fred as council president or who's speaking at
Okay. I would say I would like people to have at least one chance to speak before we actually vote. However, it is within your rights to call for a motion if you'd like. But I would prefer it if we could have people speak. Okay? So, Michelle, I see your hand raised and you haven't spoken yet.
Oh, this is just such a small point. I just wanted to mention that in the past, when we've adjusted the sizes of boards and commissions, we've really always, in part, deferred to them in terms of their understanding of whether more members would make their work easier or would confuse it, or fewer members. And so I think probably if another applicant, if somebody should come forward who wants to be on the board and they are a member of the business community, I think it would make sense to ask the seated board members and their leadership whether they feel like that would be something that would help facilitate their work or not. So I just wanted to put that out there.
All right, Andrew?
So, while the people that you've named all sound terrific, we really had an abundance of really nice candidates who stepped forward for this, and thank you for the community for doing that. I feel like there's a little bit of like everybody's kind of in the same age group, with the exception of one person who may be in the early to mid 60s. You had an applicant who was older, significantly older, at least 15 years older than that, and that was John McAllister, who was a former officer. And I think that they've been long-term residents of Narberth. John and they walk around the borough all the time. They have a perspective of a different perspective than people in the younger age group. And I feel like that would be a super valuable perspective to have in this commission.
All right, thanks, Andrea. So going back to the question about should we appoint 5 people, I'm not hearing people on anyone on Borough Council having a concern with appointing 5 today. So I think we should go ahead and plan to appoint 5 people.
The one thing, excuse me, I just wanted to echo that I agree with what Michelle said about asking the commission, but also if we were going to expand it, I think we've been pretty careful to have boards and commissions have an odd number of people. Yeah. So we would be adding 2 people if we wanted to expand it. So
I will say we discussed 7 and felt 7 was unruly, and that 5 is a sweet number. So I think I'd like to second the motion that Rob threw out for the 5.
There has been no actual motion in my opinion. To make a motion.
Go ahead. I would like to make a motion.
Right.
I would like to move that we appoint John Gonzalez to a term of 5 years, Ken Kravitsky to a term of 3 years, Katie Skeen to a term of 4 years, Rebecca Starr to a term of 2 years, and Cheryl Bullitt to a term of 1 year.
Is there a second for that motion?
Sure.
One second. Okay. Is there any discussion on this motion? All right, seeing none. All those in favor of appointing John Gonzalez, Ken Kravitsky, Katie Skeen, Rebecca Starr, and Cheryl Bullitt, okay, to the terms that Rob mentioned. All those in favor, please raise your hands. Okay, any opposed? None opposed? All right. Appointments have been made. 13D, basketball court for a TV show pilot. It's a weird one.
And local government here in action. Part of me wondered whether to bring this to council or not, but talking to council president and looking at the resolution council has for park rules, I thought I'd rather be safe than sorry and make sure you're all comfortable with this. I was approached by someone who's in the film industry who lives in the city of Philadelphia, who is interested in using the court here at Narberth for a TV show pilot that he is working on. Right now, our park rules require borough permission for anything that is, not just using the park. And he's looking to use it for about 4 hours on a Saturday evening. I believe his application had asked about using it on Saturday, August 27th, from I think like 6:30 to 10:30. 6:30 to 11. I think that's probably one that I would say if we approve it. The one thing I would say is we should probably not tell him he can't go until 11. I understand we would be taking the court away from people who might otherwise be using it. I don't know what the usage is usually like on a Saturday night, but I don't know. I think for one night, I don't know. I think someone trying to do an artistic sort of project, something that brings exposure to a fort that has such a nice history and and reputation in the community. I didn't really, I thought that would be only a good thing for the community. So I'm okay with the idea, if council's okay with the idea, other than the length, as late in the night as they're talking about going in respect for the folks who live near the park and are used to it closing more around 9 or 10 o'clock.
Is Adam Sandler in it?
I don't think so. I think this is a little more low budget of an affair.
Are we gonna keep the lights on till 11?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I think I would just say I really wouldn't want it to go until 11. I think we'd say you could, stay out there until the lights usually turn off, but then right now they turn on at 10.
Any other concern? Is he looking for extras?
I think it's it's a show about someone going into their freshman year of college who is trying to build a sports career. So unfortunately, I don't know if any of us here would qualify as extras.
I'm thinking the people who usually are playing on the basketball.
Oh, that's true. That's a good point. Sorry, I thought you were talking about us here in this room.
Although we could be a
I've given up on my show business career.
Yeah, I'll suggest that idea to him. That's a good thought, Brad.
Well, and that was my thought, was presuming that we would put some kind of signs up to let people know.
Exactly, yeah.
And it could say something about that if he's open to it. Maybe they wouldn't be, maybe they'd rather not have a ton of people hanging around, but,
Okay.
yeah.
All right. Seems like I have no objections.
Great, thank you.
All right. Old business, Skate the Foundry.
So last month, council considered a fee and a form for rental of private usage for the skate park, and that was one of the things we talked about as part of that was the interest we'd already had from Skate the Foundry. Per the email chain that I provided to council, it looks like there was maybe a little bit of misunderstanding about how that fee was going to work. I think the folks at Skate the Foundry thought that $250 meant that would be $250 for all the sessions they planned on doing, not per session. So they reached out to the Borough to ask if we would consider $150 a session instead of $250 per session. So I told them I would bring that to the attention of council. I did also let them know the concerns, again, that council expressed last month about restricting public use of the space for a private entity, and that's why partly we settled on the fee, that we did to ensure the public is getting a fair return on that trade-off. But again, my kind of thought is that we're going to be getting into the school year at that point. Skate the Foundry is going to be providing at a cost, a service or a program the borough on its own would not want to provide it, not that we wouldn't want to, wouldn't be able to provide to people, and something we otherwise might want to be able to provide to people. So I don't have, obviously I prefer $250, but I think I can live with $150 for this year.
So I have two questions. Has anyone else offered to pay us $250? And how many sessions do they want?
Yeah, others have not committed yet to the $250 fee, and oh boy, I think it was 7 sessions they're looking to do.
If it's still what was in his email, it says for the entire 6 days, he was surprised to be $250 for each day. He thought it was for that entire 6 days, not $250.
6 sessions, sorry, thank you.
You could finesse it by giving him like a discount.
Yeah, maybe instead of saying, maybe we continue to allow individual sort of things at $250, and if someone is committing to, 6, 4. Yeah, okay, so at least 4, then it's $150 per use.
Volume discount.
Michelle,
oh yeah, I did. Yeah. Yeah, I did. Thanks, Fred. So I think another piece of this was that initially we had calculated some of the costs of setting up the skate park in a way that may have not been totally in hindsight, I think when you took a second look at allocation of costs to the skate park, Samantha, it seems like maybe you concluded that they were a little lower than we had thought. And since obviously when we charge fees, it's supposed to reflect our cost. And yeah, I think if you put it well, also just sort of the cost to the community of not being able to use the facility for that time. I mean, it's really hard to put a dollar figure on it and know exactly what's right. I mean, we have received some interest from another organization, not a commercial organization, but also not the kind of like Narberth-based nonprofit that you might say, hey, sure, you can use it. But it's a skateboard advocacy, a local skateboard advocacy group that would like to do an event in the park to sort of build support and interest for their efforts to build a skate park nearby, not far actually. And so, they had already said, well, hey, I saw that the council was considering lowering this to 150. That's something our organization could handle. That's sort of another indication to me that this might actually be a more reasonable fee to use the skate park. So I'd recommend lowering it, but we could do it as a discount as well.
Samantha, can I ask a question? Is there a reason why we can't lower the number and say, but the skate park is still open for our skaters to come skate? I guess I don't know enough about skating. Do you really need to close it down, or can't?
I think that would probably be pretty disruptive to what someone's looking to
what they're trying to do. Okay.
Also, there's a question of whose insurance would cover what at that point. If you have mixed use, I mean, if we let somebody come in who's, we'd have to probably clear that with our insurer, and depending on what activity they were doing, we might need to get waivers. And I think it gets complicated when we have the park open under our rules and assumptions about skate at your own risk. It's really clear.
Okay. So we're still doing the volume discount here. I heard Michelle's proposal for just lowering. Let's do volume discount.
All right, so then, yeah, we would need an actual motion from council to actually implement that.
All right, we'll make a motion.
I move to lower to have a 150 if they buy 4 or more sessions.
For a second? I'll second that. All right, so we're voting in discussion. All right, so we're voting on whether to allow a volume discount of 150 for 4 or more sessions. All those in favor of this change? Okay. Voting. Yeah. All right. Motion passes. Motion's unanimous. Okay. Committee updates. Almost updates. Finance administration.
We went over major updates.
Okay.
I'm going to send out an email, folks. We need to think of our fall meet and greet. We could discuss, there were some changes in rules with personal fire things. We thought perhaps in the fall we could have a meet and greet and ask the fire company to come and kind of recommend how they want to keep us all safe with outdoor fire pits. So maybe look for a doodle poll on Cool with Bill Henderson and you all for us to find a fall outdoor fire pit meet and greet. Hopefully we've introduced enough ideas that the community wants to come and kind of chat more about it.
There should be s'mores.
Oh, for sure, s'mores. Oh, yeah, for sure.
I suggested that as well.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, infrastructure.
Likewise, we have no major updates. We spend a considerable amount of meeting discussing various infrastructure items and how we would, as a committee, recommend that we budget for them for 2023, but we will touch upon that when we have our budget discussion. And other than that, I did want to update everyone that the Parks and Recreation Board did resume their meetings with their new members and membership. They met on August 11th. They are busily working through their list of projects and setting their priorities, and we'll be sending an infrastructure liaison to make sure that we can keep everybody informed of what projects they're working on. And we're excited about that and their work. They have also set a new meeting schedule. They will be meeting on the second Wednesday of each month at 7:30 p.m. And I'm sure that's probably already on the calendar. I also wanted to let everyone know that we have canceled our August infrastructure committee meeting, and we will meet next again as a committee on Tuesday, September 27th at 1 p.m. Thank you.
Did Parks and Recreation elect the chair?
They did. Dennis Cowan is now the chair of Parks and Rec. Carolyn Giordano is the vice chair, and they opted for this year to test out a rotating secretary.
Okay, great. Public health and safety. Yep, Rob may not be available tonight.
You know what, maybe I can just speak on his behalf.
Sure, go ahead.
Or, you know, Bob, you took the minutes, so maybe Bob can speak.
Sure. Bob? Can you give us a public health and safety update? I think Rob is unavailable right now.
Flat-footed. I'm not prepared to do that right now.
Okay, that's fine. Let's go to ad hoc parking.
Well, I'm not going to say much because I already talked a lot about parking stuff tonight. But our next meeting is Tuesday, August 23rd at 8 a.m.
Okay. Yeah, I think Rob is unavailable tomorrow.
I should just speak to say we reviewed the PAC, we looked at EV chargers, we looked at recommendations from the EAC as well, and I think we discussed kind of a new replacement.
When's the EV charger grant going to come down from us?
Yeah, so what we're doing right now is we're fine-tuning the cost proposal based on the feedback from public health and safety. And I've also made outreach to NIDA about them having a discussion about what level of financial support they're comfortable providing to the project. And then once I know what the actual net cost to the borough would be, then that proposal will then come to Borough Council for full consideration.
Okay.
Just wanted to add one detail. Bill Henderson has agreed to be our temporary emergency management coordinator or interim.
Council appointed, yeah.
Yeah, we just appointed in the consent agenda.
Okay, so you guys got that.
I'm glad you agreed.
Just
and thanks to Bill Henderson.
I'm sitting here in the dark with longhand notes, so okay.
No, that's fine. And I'd like to thank Mr. Anderson for stepping forward. We need an emergency management coordinator for the state to be happy with us. So. And he's got a lot of experience with the job. And thanks, Bob, for bringing that up. Okay, comments for the good of council. All right, seeing none. So the agenda has an executive session, but I'm happy to say that we do not actually need to do this executive session. I believe that's still true. Okay. So I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Wait.
Do you have a? All right. There's a motion to adjourn.
Hold on, Fred.
Yes.
Can I request an executive?
Bob's trying to speak.
Can I request an executive session, Fred?
Personnel issues?
Yeah.
What's the issue? You have to ask what the issue is.
Cindy, can you help me with that?
Yeah, sorry, no, it's not what it is. The conversation on personnel issue that we've discussed.
Never mind. We can, if you know what, I'll talk with you offline, Fred, and then if we need one, you can arrange it for a future.
Well, now I'm kind of, I'll admit I'm kind of curious now.
Okay, if there's a request, we will have an executive session after this meeting.
But we're not going to be coming back.
We will not be coming, you're not, are you willing to come back afterwards to vote on something?
Does anyone anticipate a vote?
No.
Anticipate a vote? Okay, so we will not return after this meeting. All right, so we will have an executive session to discuss a personnel matter. And we will not be returning. Okay, I will return to the motion to adjourn. Is there a second from the motion to adjourn? There is. All those in favor of adjourning? Okay, this meeting is adjourned. I'm going to take a moment to stretch. Thank you to members of the public.